Greetings, humans. You have entered the Command Zone, your destination for all aspects of Elder Dragon Highlander. Enjoy your stay.
What's up, everybody? It's time for Bloomburrow with Rachel and Jimmy. That's right. I introduced myself in song. My name is Jimmy.
And also me in song. My name is Rachel.
You know, it's probably better than what Josh and I normally sing, to be honest.
I love this little song. We need a new intro.
Come on down.
Yeah, that's fun.
Bloomburrow, most powerful commanders in Blub.
BLB.
BLB, everybody.
We're going to talk about the cutest Whittle bunnies and also some really busted magic cards.
Yeah, this set, I've been saying it now for a couple of times. It's an all-timer, it looks like.
It's so cool.
And it's hitting across many different axes, and there are, of course, very busted commanders. So we're going to showcase the best of the best. We've chosen them. We can't talk about all of them anymore. There's too many, so we're going to talk about the most powerful and some of the cutest and some of the most fun to build. But before we get into it, cardkingdom.com/command. You've heard me say this so many times. Why haven't you just gone there and just checked out what...
Maybe they have, Jay.
Yeah, actually, that's a good point. If you have gone there, great. If you haven't, why haven't you gone there? Cardkingdom.com/command. Enter it into your URL user bar, and you're on the regular website. You'll get to understand why we love it so much. They have a huge selection of cards. You're also supporting the show. You can get single sealed product pre-orders and more. You can also trade in cards, so you get in-store credit to get more for your collection. And the best part is they ship it all to you in one convenient package. So it's going to be all the bunnies and all the mice in one convenient package. How cute. You get an explosion of cuteness at your doorstep. You get to build your deck immediately and support the show and buy those magic cards because you know you're going to anyway. You need to play Magic, right? So cardkingdom.com/command is the place to do it.
And once those are in your hand, you're going to need to protect them. Go to ultrapro.com/command to pick up the hottest accessories in the Magic world. In the card, in the TCG world. Bloomburrow is a huge set. It feels like so many people are obsessed with the whole vibe, red wall vibes, and you can get them over at Ultra Pro. They have the officially licensed Magic art, so if you're into one commander over another, if you really like the mice or you really like the bunnies, go check out Ultra Pro, see what they have in the way of Bloomburrow stock, and do it soon because these popular playmats will sell out fast.
Yeah.
And there's some really, really cute ones. I've got the Zinnia playmat. You've got a little mouse.
A little mouse. I don't know which one this was. It's not Mabel, but it's extra cute.
Yeah, he looks like a little farmer.
Yeah.
There's some really great new art from this, and hopefully we'll see a lot of it on Ultra Pro products, on sleeves, on playmats, on deck boxes, binders. Go check it out, and you can keep your cute little fuzzy new cards in some very cool storage and protection solutions over at ultrapro.com/command.
Last way to support the show is directly at patreon.com/command zone. Our patrons are the best. It's the truth. They get to watch game nights and extra turns a day early. That's pretty cool, ad-free. Sometimes they even catch little mistakes that we make and let us know. Patrons also get to submit sometimes on polls that Rachel will put up in the Discord or on the actual channel on Patreon for about, something that's coming with a new episode that we're drafting stuff or whatever it is. So patrons really get to contribute and be a part of our community. Our Discord is great. We're all on there answering questions. You get to ask your own questions, rules questions about whatever in the general chat. There's a lot of space there to have a lot of fun and meet some new people as well. And of course, we shout out one lucky patron every single episode. So this episode is dedicated to Arun Sentil. Arun,
you rock.
You do rock. Cool name. You're like a legendary creature now.
That's what happens when they get shouted out.
Yeah. You can come up with your own text. Arun, I feel like you're like a white-black kind of commander, maybe. Yeah. But you get to make that decision, not me. Maybe chat does too. So let's move on to the main topic here. The most powerful commanders from Bloomburrow. As the norm now, we can't cover every single commander that comes out, but we are trying to make sure to do the ones that really resonate with us or the ones that are getting really popular or having an impact on the format that we expect them to, at least.
We also don't cover any of the ones that are going to be covered in the Precon upgrade guide. If there's a face commander and you expect them to be the lead singer of the deck, we're going to spend a whole episode talking about them, so we don't talk about them here.
Yeah. Okay, so let's get right into it. We're going to start things off with an Otter Wizard.
It's Alania, Divergent Storm.
Yeah.
3 blue-red for a legendary Otter Wizard. She's a 3/5. Whenever you cast a spell, if it's the first instant spell, the first sorcery spell, or the first Otter spell, you may have target opponent draw a card.
Oh.
If you do copy that spell, you may choose new targets for the copy. So first instant you cast, you can give away a card and get 2 of those instants. That's the same for sorceries and otters.
Yeah. So if you cast an instant and a sorcery and a changeling or an otter, you get 3 copies of those spells. But you do have to basically gift a card to an opponent of your choice. This is very similar to the gift mechanic, but they just don't have it here.
Yeah, it's very demonstraty as well.
Yes.
Like you give something away to get 2 of something.
Yeah.
We're obviously talking about a spell slinger commander. All of the otters in Bloomburrow really care about non-creature spells, and instants and sorceries in Alania is no different. So the first thing we're going to talk about is what spells are we copying?
Yeah, there's a ton of options here. Now, it's, of course, each turn, so instants are pretty good, right?
Yeah, instants are pretty good. You can copy it on any player's turn. There's some otters with flash that you could do that with as well. I think the first thing I want to talk about here is your commander is a 5-drop. So
yes.
I do think you want some amount of very cheap instants and sorceries that you can copy right away.
Yeah,
so you want cantrips or lightning bolts or just 1 or 2 mana spells so that you're getting value out of that 5-mana commander even if it gets removed.
Yeah, this thing will be asked to remove as well because your opponents not only are not going to like you doubling stuff, but giving stuff to opponents at the same time. Not so hot. And then when you're casting really powerful spells, then things are going to get real dicey for you.
Yeah, so I want to talk about the big spells that we're copying because that's how things get really impactful.
Yeah.
I wanted to talk about burn spells first because they're great to double and they really represent a win con here, turns Alania into an engine. And one of the coolest burn spells to copy is Prisoner's Dilemma.
This is hilarious. You can also flash it back so you could copy it again later. So Prisoner's Dilemma just came out last year. I don't know when it came out.
This is MKM,
yeah. So this is like the classic Prisoner's Dilemma. We'll read it, and then we won't spend too much time talking about it, but the main thing is the damage it does. So each opponent secretly chooses Silence or Snitch. Then the choices are revealed. If each opponent chose Silence, Prisoner's Dilemma only deals 4 damage to each of them. If each opponent chose Snitch, then each one takes 8 damage. Otherwise, it does 12 damage to each opponent who chose Silence. So you get to choose. Am I going to Snitch or am I going to choose Silence? It is best for everyone if everyone chooses Silence. It is really bad for you if you're the only one that chooses Silence.
Yeah. Or if you chose Silence and someone else chooses Snitch.
Right.
If everyone chooses Silence, everybody takes the least amount of damage.
4 damage.
If everybody chooses Snitch, they all take 8. But there is some upside. If one person chooses Snitch, everyone else who stayed silent actually takes 12.
Yeah.
So the cool thing about this is the politics really change from one copy to another copy.
Because you resolve them.
If somebody snitched on the last one, you're like, I'm snitching on this one. Like,
and then everyone's going to take 8.
Immediate blowback for what you choose in the first one. And
cool.
even if everybody chooses Silence twice, you still deal 8 damage to each of your opponents, and you have a flashback waiting in the wings.
Yeah. This card is hilarious, and because you get to do it twice in a row with Alania, makes it extra funny, I think, because exactly the situation you just described. I love that.
Price of Progress is another great burn spell. It gets a little dicey when you're copying it. It deals damage to each player equal to twice the number of non-basics that player controls. But if you're running Price of Progress, you could to build your mana base around this. A lot of fetch lands, fetch a lot of basics, get ready for doubling a Price of Progress, and absolutely dome your opponents for a huge amount of damage.
Yeah, late game, this could be 20 damage per cast. So
Easy,
this could just end the game on the spot, and it's a 2-mana instant, notably. So wait for your best chance to do that.
Super powerful things to copy are always good. River's Rebuke is hilarious to copy. This is the one that returns all non-land permanents target player controls.
Oh.
So it's like you and you get out of here.
Right.
And
it's not like Cycrypt.
us two are riding into battle. So you make a friend on that one.
Or it's hey, Jimmy, you're mana screwed, so I'm just going to have everyone else step back, and you're not a threat, kiddo.
So you can keep all your stuff.
Yeah, that's
your
very
signet.
good. I like that. I also like what you put in here for Inspired Tinkering. This is just a card that is basically some impulse draw, 3 cards off the top, but you also create 3 treasure tokens. So copying this for 1 extra card an opponent gets, for 5 mana, you're going to get 6 treasure tokens. So you've bought back the cost of it already.
And 6 cards. So now you're mana positive and up 6 cards. It's very, very powerful.
Until
Obviously,
the end of your next turn,
just
too.
as well and that kind of thing. It does the exact same thing, but it is not as expensive.
Yeah.
Snap is really good. Any spells that untap your lands, especially at instant speed, mean you're going to be mana positive. Casting your instants and sorceries, it's always a good thing to copy.
Yeah, the play pattern, right? Play Alania, let's say you have mana now, you go to the next, you play a bunch of stuff up, and then you hold Snap up. And the next turn, or someone else's turn, you Snap, and then next turn you can do another instant, so it allows you to keep that train going.
I want to take a second to mention it because it's the obvious way to build this is with extra turns.
Oh. Well then.
Yep. you can do that. If you want to put a bunch of extra turns into your deck, your otter commander says, great, you 1 extra turn, you get 2 extra turns. But if you're going to build the deck this way, make sure you have a quick way to close it out. And the plan isn't just to take 7 extra turns and hope that's enough. Because it's extremely non-deterministic and very boring.
Yeah, very, very boring.
So have a plan if you're going to do the extra turns build.
Well, so what are some ways that people can die with Alania then?
This is my favorite card with Alania is Cerebral Vortex.
Okay.
Is another one of these burn spells.
Hilarious art, by the way. Well, not hilarious, terrifying.
It's a instant for 1 blue red, and it says target player draws 2 cards, and then Cerebral Vortex deals damage to that player equal to the number of cards he or she has drawn this turn.
Oh.
So Cerebral Vortex, if you copy it and you give the player targeted with Cerebral Vortex the card,
Right.
immediately gives them 3 cards and domes them for probably 3 or 4, depending on whose turn it is.
Right.
And then you get a second copy that gives them 2 more cards and domes them for another 7, 8.
Yeah.
So you could give them a lot of cards, but
They
it's
just
a
die.
ton of burn on the spot out of nowhere.
Yeah. That's great too, and especially if you're playing against Josh types who have drawn, hey, this is the turn where I drew 6 cards. Well, Cerebral Vortex is going to make you take 8 plus 10, like 18 damage.
There's a huge amount of damage out of nowhere.
Yeah.
And it's like, sure, they get extra cards, but they already have those.
Yep. Very cool. I love that.
Molten Psyche is similar. It's each player shuffles the cards from his or her hand into his or her library and then draws that many cards. And the Metalcraft says if you control 3 or more artifacts, obviously you'll have to build around this a little bit.
Yep.
Molten Psyche deals damage to each opponent equal to the number of cards that player has drawn this turn. So this is a wheel plus the extra damage to it.
Yeah, and there's, again, a lot of decks that are all about punishing draw, the ones that play the Howling Minds and stuff. So that's definitely a road you could build here.
There's also something to be said for giving away a card and then casting a wheel twice means that the giving away a card doesn't really change the
anything.
math at all. It just means they take a ton of damage.
Yeah, Rune Flare Trap is hilarious. It's a spell you can cast for free if an opponent drew 3 or more cards this turn. You can just pay a red, not for free. So you could go Cerebral Vortex, gift it, and then enter Rune Flare Trap for just a red mana and deals damage to target player equal to the number of cards in their hand.
And you're giving them cards.
Wrecked.
I like this as a burn commander. It feels like more proactive. It feels super, it does feel sort of like ottery playful, which is funny.
Yeah.
Rather than using this to copy removal spells and that kind of thing.
Yeah, that's very cool. And there's a lot of permanents that do similar things. Zerzoth, Chaos Rider, whenever an opponent draws their first card each turn, if it's not their turn. So you have these other spells that are making them draw cards, or you're gifting them a card. They created 1/1 Red Devil. You created 1/1 Red Devil, which is kind of cool.
So now whenever you're giving away cards, you're also getting devils to defend your life total and throw more damage around. Fairy Mastermind's an obvious fit for this deck. You're giving people additional cards. That means that you can draw as well. And Psychic Possession does a similar thing.
Anytime we can throw
well.
Psychic Possession into it.
I love this card. I think it's so fun to play with. And I know the otter thing looks like flavor text on this commander.
Alania doubles otters, that's right.
But the Bloomburrow otters are all extremely powerful with this kind of stuff. So there's a lot of otters from the set that are going to be really great to double. Stormcatch Mentor is the first one I thought of. It's instants and sorceries you cast cost 1 less to cast. Obviously, having 2 of those is completely cracked.
Double this sucker instantly.
Kindle Spark Duo is a pinger, deals 1 damage to target opponent. Whenever you cast a non-creature spell, untap Kindle Spark Duo. 2 of those means you're throwing around a lot of damage.
A lizard otter. And then Storm Splitter is an otter wizard. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery, you create a token that's a copy of Storm Splitter and you exile that token. So if you're doing a lot of instant sorceries in that turn, you're making a bunch of 1/4 hasties.
And if you start with 2 of them...
Yeah, they each create copies each time.
Right. You're going to make a ton of them all in one turn. And obviously 1/4s is not like a super high power, but it is a lot of creatures to create out of nowhere.
Yeah.
So there is another thing to be said about offspring creatures. Now, I have talked to multiple judges about how this works. And I believe that if you copy a spell that you have cast with offspring, both spells have offspring.
Right.
And you get tokens off of both of them.
I believe you're correct. So offspring is you can pay an additional cost when you cast the spell, and when that creature or whatever enters the battlefield, you create a 1/1 token copy of it. So it's like it's adding it onto the actual card itself, like Kicker.
Yeah, and you're copying the spell. So if you copy a kicked spell, of course, you're going to have 2 kicked spells. This is a little different because it's Kicker that applies an ability that happens later.
Right.
But it's just like like Squad, and I believe this is how Squad works as well. So if you cast like a Coruscation Mage, which is 1 in a red for an Otter Wizard with Offspring 2, whenever you cast a non-creature spell, this creature deals 1 damage to each opponent.
Ooh.
If you cast it for Offspring with 4 and you get 2 of them, you're going to have 4 of these cards, like 2 Gutter Snipes in one box.
2 2/2s and 2 1/1 copies.
Yes,
yeah.
exactly.
So 4 Gutter Snipes. Yeah, that is
2 Gutter Snipes. They all do 1 damage.
Right. Well, that's how you win the game, right? Is that by having that out, and maybe a Gutter Snipe too, because why not?
Might as well.
Cast like a couple of spells. Everyone takes 6, 8 damage per. Yikes.
Not to mention, Maskwood Nexus turns all of your creature spells into Otter spells.
Yeah. Yeah. So if you build the Otter route, because now we've talked about a way that you're punishing draw, a way that you're maybe going extra turns, or a way that you're going on the Otters, those all have slightly different builds, which is really exciting.
Yeah.
Cool.
So that's Alania. I think this deck is really, really fun. And it's a like very explosive deck. You do have to be aware that your commander is very expensive and you can't really cast it until you're ready to pop off.
Yeah, and the moment, so if someone doesn't know what Alania does, they'll let you cast it and maybe get 1 turn with it. The moment they do know what your plan is, it becomes much, much dicier in general. So just keep that in mind. Okay, next up we got a cute rabbit warrior. It's Baylen the Haymaker. This is a Naya commander, so it's just red, green, and white for a 4/3 legendary rabbit warrior. You can tap 2 untapped tokens you control to add 1 mana of any color, and then you can tap 3 untapped tokens you control to draw a card, or you can tap 4 untapped tokens to put 3 1/1 counters on Baylen, and it gains trample until end of turn. So this is kind of like tokens, Kumena-ish, right?
Kind of, yeah.
Kumena is all about merfolk, but this cares just about any kinds of token, which is really exciting. Which means if you just have 4 treasures, those treasures, instead of being sacrificed for mana, those 4 treasures actually equal 2 mana with Baylen out.
It's
without having to sack them.
It's a very interesting commander because it's all payoff, right?
You're right.
Everything in it is just like, if you have this, then you have cool other stuff.
It's the second half of the equation.
So it does feel like this deck is just full of cards that make tokens. I would
absolutely.
like 40 cards in this deck make tokens and make multiples of them.
Fortunately, Naya is pretty good at that, right?
Naya is pretty good at that. So the first thing we're going to talk about is tokens. I do think this could be a tchotchke deck, like you're mentioning. You make treasures and clues and foods and all of that. That is certainly a direction you could go. I do think Naya lends itself better to a creature token route, and they're easier to untap in these colors, and they're easier to take advantage of in these colors. If you had blue, then you've got a lot of support there. But here you just, like, Naya's very good at using a lot of creatures.
Yeah.
So I think you could go with either way. Depends on, your personal style. If you want to do a lot of treasures and tap them for cards, that sounds busted also.
Yeah.
But I focused this on tokens, on creature tokens. So artifact mutations and that kind of thing that destroy stuff and make tokens equal to the number.
Yeah.
Call the Copper Coats is a classic. Make a ton of bodies all at instant speed.
Yeah.
Farmer
Instant
Cotton.
speed seems so important in this case, right?
I agree, because it's a scary commander. It's not the kind of commander that I'm just going to leave floating around. And if you don't have that many tokens, then your commander isn't that scary. But if suddenly you have a ton on the board, that's how you really take over the game.
Yeah.
I like Farmer Cotton as well, if you're talking about pure just like...
Yeah, you make food and halfling tokens.
Yeah, for X. So it's like you make twice as many tokens as you would normally would on a not cracked card.
Yeah, that's pretty powerful. Now, the Academy Manufacturer players are wondering, are there enough food creators in this deck that you want to run the Academy Manufacturer?
I mean, I think if you're doing that, you build around it, right? You're building treasures, you're building food, you're building clues. Like, that is certainly a build that you could take this. But I do think that the creatures makes this deck more consistent and gives you more support for it.
Yeah.
Because if you're going entirely food and clues, having the bodies on the board to defend yourself is tricky. They're harder to untap. We are going to talk about a lot of ways to untap all of your creatures in Naya. And I do think that's a big part of this, as it is in Kumena.
Yeah, because you can just keep it going. I like that you added Kadira here, Caller of the Small. When it deals combat damage for each token you control, you create a 1/1 white rabbit creature token.
Bunny!
So it actually matches very thematically with the commander.
It's also super explosive.
Yeah.
Kadira says, like, if this hits, which is sort of a big if, you do get twice as much value.
Yeah, and I also love Siege Gang Lieutenant here. Not Commander. This is the 4-mana version with Lieutenant. So at the beginning of combat, if you control your commander, you create 2 red 1/1 goblins with haste.
Yep.
And then you get to tap those to add mana.
Right away.
Right away. Or if you have 3, then you can draw a card. That to me is the juiciest.
I agree.
Multiples of 3.
This is going to be the scariest Scoot Swarm you've ever seen in your life.
Because all the Scoot Swarm copies are the one ones.
All of the Scoots are cards. All of the Scoots are mana.
Oh my gosh.
And it's so snowbally that I just can't even imagine doing the math on this.
Well, sometimes
because you actually need to track.
Yeah.
You're like, I have 60 Scoot Swarms.
Okay, tap 3 to draw a card.
I'm going to tap 21 to draw 7 cards.
Yeah.
Like, you just like, what a nightmare.
A lot of dice. You're using the dice not as the D20, but like the 2 and the 1. So it's 21 on 2 D6.
Oh, my God.
The great thing, though, is that you can also just swing your commander and threaten pure death because you can add tap 4, right? We haven't talked about that, but you can definitely just tap 4 and make it super, super powerful that way.
I mean, your commander is ramp, card draw, and a win con. All the deck needs to be is tokens.
Token makers, yeah, totally.
March of the Multitudes is Convoke and makes a bunch of tokens at instant speed.
With
but my
lifelink?
favorite is Wildfire Awakener.
Ooh, with Convoke too. So it's X, 1 red and a white with Convoke, so you can tap creatures to help pay for 1 mana.
And when it enters the battlefield, you create X 1/1 red elemental creature tokens with whenever this creature becomes tapped.
Oop.
It deals 1 damage to target player.
See you later.
I love this. Like, this is a great payoff for leaning into the creature tokens. It's tapping all your creatures, making that many creatures, and then having a win con in a box as well is really sweet.
Yeah, and finally, a deck where doubling season is good.
Oh, no. It's good with the counters. It's good with the tokens. It's busted.
I was gonna say normally, like I've noticed that I would take out doubling season because I'll have an annoying procession or parallel lives instead. But because your tokens add mana now, it seems much more doable to slam one of these down early. And then from there, really start popping off.
Yeah, I agree. And the fact that it doubles the number of counters that you're putting on your commander means that your clock is so much faster.
Yeah.
I only run doubling season in decks where both the counters and the tokens are relevant. Right. And here it does feel that way.
Yeah, I would say the only thing you got to be careful of is the moment you start adding counters to your commander, it is your main engine piece. People will want to remove it.
Sure will.
That's why you just win before they can. Duh.
I alluded to it already, but we're talking about untapping stuff. We've got to be, if your commander cares about tapping. So obviously you're putting Seaborn Muse type stuff in here. This is good with all of the tchotchke stuff as well, because it untaps all of your permanents. But Halo Fountain and Drum Bellower untap all your creatures quite effectively.
I think this is a legit deck that can actually win with Halo Fountain.
It should really try, yes.
Because you have to tap the creatures and untap it with Halo Fountain for it to happen. Now, it does take 5 mana for the win the game thing, but... 5 white mana specifically, but there's no other deck where you can freely tap your tokens without having to worry about putting in the combat or whatever.
Well, you tap 10 tokens to make 5 white mana, right?
Oh, that's
you still need, like, you have the mana production.
Good point. Yeah.
And then you just untap those 10 that you've tapped. So Halo Fountain is not an engine piece. I would consider it a win con. You could put it in as a card draw engine as well, but it's going to be scary and need to get removed pretty fast.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of times where you play Halo Fountain and win that exact same turn.
Yeah.
Drum
Bellower will untap all of your creatures and is, again, a really good payoff for building this around creature tokens rather junk tokens.
Yep.
Finally, like, how are you winning this game? Doubling season is a big thing that we talked about, winning with commander damage. But also, you're a token deck. There's a lot of great win cons for tokens in these colors. We've already talked about Halo Fountain, Impact Tremors, Goblin Bombardment, Perforos. This is a great Throne of the God Pharaoh deck.
Oh, such a good Throne of the God Pharaoh deck.
It's at the beginning of your end step. Each opponent loses life to equal to the number of tapped creatures you control. It's great with all your untappers. Very powerful.
You could also play, it's not Second Harvest. It's the one that's from Amonkhet, which brings out lands based on how many tapped creatures you control.
Oh, yeah. The Harvest Season.
Yeah.
Which
is great for the bunnies, harvesting the little carrots.
Fun.
Although this commander is a warrior,
love Harvest
not
season.
sure.
Yeah, this is not a farm bunny. This
not
is
a farm bunny. Farmer
she
Cotton
is not messing around.
But
Farmer Cotton, I did not think about like being in a rabbit deck and being like,
these darn pesky rabbits. I need some help from the halflings.
Baylen is sweet. It's very, very powerful. It does kind of put all your eggs in one basket, which is a little challenging but it's a really powerful basket.
I mean, this is the put your eggs in the basket type of deck for sure.
Yeah.
Bunnies don't hatch eggs, do they?
Unless they're the Easter Bunny.
Unless they're the Easter Bunny. What is going on with modern and ancient traditions?
I do think, as we say often, if your commander is just the payoff, put all your tokens on the board first.
Yeah.
Then cast your commander, get a ton of value out of it.
Yeah, at the very least, you'll be able to draw cards, right? That's
yes.
a big one.
All right.
Cool. All right.
Next.
Next up, we got Clement, the Worrywort.
I love him.
Yeah, he's great. This is a frog druid, 1 a green and a blue for a 3/3. Whenever Clement or another creature you control enters, return up to 1 target creature you control with lesser mana value to its owner's hand. And then frogs you control have tap, add green or blue, spend this mana only to cast a creature spell. So this is your flicker deck, basically, but not flickering, bringing it back to your hand, and it's up to, so you don't have to necessarily bounce a creature when Clement or another creature enters.
But it makes them jump.
Yeah,
like
it makes
frogs.
them jump like little froggies.
Boink,
And then the
boink.
frogs all have the ability to become mana dorks.
Yes. So the first thing I was thinking about is cheap creatures with ETBs.
Right, because you want to bounce them. You play Clement or a creature. What's less mana value? Bring it back to my hand because I want to play it again.
Right. So I think this is a great Coiling Oracle deck. Coiling Oracle's back,
Oh, yeah.
baby. Get a land. Get yourself a card. It's great to bounce. It's great to bounce your 1-drops.
Yep, very cool.
Thieving Skydiver is busted to
Oh
be able to
my
cast
gosh.
over and over and over again.
With a different kicker cost each time to steal
Yeah.
more artifacts or equipment. Oh my gosh.
That's when it enters, you get to steal an artifact.
Thanks to kicker.
Arboreal Grazer is a classic 1-drop that just has a powerful ETB and is going to be like decent on the board. The interesting thing about Clement is he can only bounce something that's smaller than the creature that entered. So you do
yeah.
kind of do a reverse like birthing pod thing. Like you want a 2-drop on the board, you want a 1-drop. You play Clement, bounce your 2-drop, play your 2-drop, bounce your 1-drop, get all these triggers again.
I see. Yeah.
So the cheap ones are very... You're going to cast the most. You want
Yeah.
ETBs with draw and ramp and just general value stuff.
Yeah.
I like Icefang Coatl a lot too.
Oh, yeah. Enters the battlefield, draws a card. This is pretty good. Kind of the Baleful Strix for Simic. Jeering Homunculus is hilarious. When it enters the battlefield, you can go the creature. It's a 1 and a blue. So being able to go just a bunch of stuff over and over again, it seems pretty annoying.
All your stuff is so little that I do think you want people to leave you alone. You're going to be doing a lot of stuff and none of it is really impacting your board.
Yeah.
So I do think you want people to kind of like bother over there.
Yeah.
I also have a set of creatures that I think should go in here that reset your chain. So bounce like one of your higher drops so you can play the 4-drop, play the 3-drop, play the
right.
2-drop again.
Because your 1-drop can't bounce a 2-drop.
Right.
Has
You
to go the
can't
other way.
go back up. So running like Shrieking Drakes or Quicklings that come in and allow you to bounce another creature sort of restart your value.
And they're low mana value, so you can bring them back as well.
Yeah, you can recast the Shrieking Drake and bounce the Shrieking Drake, and all of that is going to be powerful.
Yeah, I like that.
Something I didn't mention, but should definitely be in this deck, is Baron. Baron, the wizard that comes in and says
Baron,
if a thing left your battlefield this turn, you draw a card.
Yeah, this deck feels like it just wants to play on its own board quite a lot.
Oh, yeah.
So how are we going to get in for some damage in here?
Well, I like these because they also pick up your top end again. But I think we're dealing damage with some ninjas.
Are you saying that there's a ninja turtle?
Yeah, I think so. Capitec Wrecker seems so great in this deck.
Yeah, that's a great card. Ninjutsu for 1 in the green, and it is a 1 in the green card. When it deals combat damage, you may remove a death touch counter from it. It comes in with a death touch counter. And if you do, you exile an artifact or enchantment. And then you're like, oh, I have this 1/3 card that doesn't have death touch anymore sitting around. If only I could reuse this sweet ninja.
I could bounce it with one of my frogs, for example.
Yeah, or my Shrieking Drake's a great creature to get in for the combat damage, and then Jitsu again over and over and over again.
Right. The cheap like ninja 1-drops that come in, do a thing, have evasion, are going to make these ninjas really, really good and a part of your engine just overall.
Yeah.
And there are some pretty good ninjas in green and blue. The other thing that I wanted to mention here is that you're also in green and blue. Casting creatures is a good thing. Beast Whisperer.
There's a lot of value you can get from that.
Can you imagine all of the cards you're drawing off of just casting your Shrieking Drakes and recasting your Arboreal Grazers?
Yeah, because now you got Beast Whisperer in the mix here, and then you have Guardian Project type stuff.
Like Cloudstone Curio, your commander is not, but it does do a lot of the similar value engines.
I mean, you probably play Cloudstone Curio in this type of
certainly
deck.
could, yeah.
Yeah, and that is by far one of the most, okay, we got to delete that, or the player off the board
this has
ASAP.
to stop.
Yeah.
But other creature cast triggers like Silverback Elder is very good.
Oh, yeah.
Gain you, ramp some cards, gain you some life, blow up some artifacts and enchantments.
Yep, I like that a lot. Volo Guide to Monsters. Haven't seen this guy in a while. Whenever you cast a creature spell that doesn't share a creature type with a creature you control or a creature in a graveyard, copy that spell.
This one's interesting. It felt like we were doing a real variety of cards, and Volo kind of gives you even more value.
Yeah.
It doesn't quite work with like the copies being on the board and if you bounce the non-token version. So eventually Volo gets turned off. But
But
with all of your frogs jumping around, and like we have snakes and what is this? An ape,
a beast, a snake, a
dragon,
a homunculus we mentioned today, a merfolk.
Like Volo just sort of doubles all of your ETBs.
Yeah, and not to mention that the copy maintains the original mana value, so that you could have a turn where you have your Quickling and your Shrieking Drake have both done the thing. You play a Volo, and then the copy from a Volo allows you to get 2 things back,
right?
Which is kind of cool.
Classic creature cast stuff. We've got like a Champion of Lambholt. I think is probably how this deck wins the game. Anything that
wait, really?
Yeah,
I've never heard that before.
You have to get some payoff that actually produces a threat at some point. Genesis Chamber, Intruder Alarm. You're going to be able to make a lot of mana if you have this frog thing going.
Yeah.
So there is certainly a lot to be done here.
What's that really awful enchantment that allows you to tap a creature to tap someone else's lands?
Oh, Opposition.
Yeah, Opposition seems really nasty in this deck.
You can tap creatures down.
And then you're bouncing them anyway to play it again, tap it again.
Yeah. Oh my God.
If you want to be that person, I mean, you were already thinking about it. I didn't need to say it, right?
The final category is frogs.
No way.
And if we're talking about frogs, you got to have Spore Frog.
Yeah, this is the Fog Frog. Love it. Sack it, prevent all combat damage.
Poison Dart Frog is a little mana dork. That's just a frog that adds mana even before your commander comes down, which is nice.
Yeah, that art is so cute.
He's such a little cutie.
Yeah, Croaking Counterpart's fun. This is a sorcery that creates a token that's a copy of non-frog creature, except it's a 1/1 green frog. So again, copies maintain the mana value, and you can flash it back, which is pretty cool.
We've been talking a lot about ETBs and being able to do a copy that's also a frog that taps for mana, I think is quite powerful. Yeah,
very cool. There's a lot of frogs out there, and Bloomburrow adds a few as well. So Sunshower Druid enters, you put a 1/1 counter on a creature and you gain a life, and that's just a 1-drop.
Yeah.
So this is going to be a sweet card in Limited, but it's going to be really good in this deck because being able to play it over and over again is quite nice.
Pond Prophet is a frog that when it enters the battlefield, you draw a card. There's a lot of incidental frogs that are very good in this deck and are good with this archetype because this is the draft for the archetype for frogs is this sort of like bouncy thing.
Yeah.
So there's going to be a lot that you can look at for this deck, which means you're going to be able to make a lot of mana as well.
Yeah, because all the frogs tap for green or blue. We should mention the other hidden third ability or whatever. So Lightning Greaves is super good. Every time you play a frog, switch over the Greaves, tap it for mana, throw it on something else. Or Concordant Crossroads, but I don't recommend playing this card unless you're ready to win the game.
Yes, it's a scary card because it gives all creatures haste, not just yours. So this would be one that, like, if you play an Intruder Alarm, you pop off, you cast a frog, it taps for mana, you bounce back to your hand.
Yeah.
You're doing this sort of like creature-y loop business.
Yeah, and then 1,000 Year Elixir is great in activated ability decks, so this includes itself right here. Very nice. All right, so that's Clement the Worrywort. What is he worried about?
Frogs, clearly.
Your opponents will be worried about frogs. All right, let's move on to the next card. This is a big one. Flubs the Fool! This is probably the most popular card and discussed card online right now from the set, I think.
Definitely. And this is the box topper. So I'm hopefully that Flubs isn't going to be crazy expensive.
Yeah. And a quick shout out. I love tarot cards and Flubs the Fool, his heart is 100% based directly off of the Fool card, which is the first card in the tarot deck. It begins the entire journey. It's about entering into the world as kind of a fool. You don't know anything. You're going to learn all these lessons. And this card is so perfect for that.
Read the flavor text because it's my favorite.
He knows exactly where he's going and exactly how he isn't getting there. All right, let's read the card. You go for it.
It's a legendary frog scout.
Gosh.
You may play an additional land on each of your turns. Whenever you play a land or cast a spell, draw a card. If you have no cards in your hand, otherwise, discard a card. Flubs! Flubs, what are you doing?
So he's Teamer. So he's
green, blue, red. Yeah, 3 mana altogether.
05, and literally you play him, you play a land, you have to discard a card. You're like, why is this card being talked about? Because it's literally very powerful.
It's so busted.
Yeah, people are making EDH builds out of it. It's
whenever
wild.
you play a land or cast a spell, draw a card is such a powerful line of text that the rest of it does not matter, and it is completely worth discarding cards in your hand until you get to that point.
Get to that point, yeah.
Or just, building around it.
Yeah, so you're literally playing stuff and you're emptying your hand as it happens, and then at the end point, it's like, cool, now whenever I play something, I get something back, and if I can chain that together, we're in business.
So I want to do a word of warning about Flubs because I know there's a lot of people that are super, super excited about this frog, and he is awesome. But I do want to mention that he is a bit of an advanced level build. There's a lot of downside. There's a lot of choices that have to happen when you're playing Flubs, what you discard, when you discard it, when is the time to start, when it was the time to play Flubs.
Yeah, when does Flubs
when can
come
you
out?
start when can you afford to discard cards? So it is not an easy build, and I will say that as somebody who has been trying to build this deck for about a week.
Wow.
When I was doing research for the deck, this was before Flubs was announced, I was like, okay, I'm just going to have to build 2 versions of this and just see what works and what doesn't. Done a lot of goldfishing with this card, and it's very, very powerful, but it's also difficult to play and to build.
And the sequencing seems pretty wild here because you'll probably find many times when you're playing, you're like, uh-oh, I shouldn't have played that card because now I'm discarding and it's not actually doing what I want, and now I'm stuck in this weird position with Flubs out, and now I'm looking the fool.
Absolutely. I mean, you get to a point where you have 2 cards in your hand, right? And if you play either one, you discard the other and have no cards in hand. And so getting to 2 cards is like, no!
Yeah, what am I going to do?
I can't play either of these.
Right.
So you can get in these awkward positions where you're like, I can't get moving.
Can't do anything,
But you do, once you get moving, it's you play 1 card, you draw a card. You play 1 card, you draw a card. You play 1 card, you draw a card. So it sets up this pattern where you need tons of extra land drops, which he hints at.
He gets 1, so you get to play 2 with him, but you're going to want to add more to that.
Because if you play a land, draw a card, it's a land, play a land, draw a card, it's another land, you're stuck.
Game over.
And that's a disaster. So you really want to be able to, you need your Azuzas and your explorations and explorers. Anything that says if you draw another land, the chain doesn't stop.
Right.
Because that's how your Flubs get stuck in a hole in the ground. Is like, oh no!
How did I get here? How foolish of me.
So you do have to have a lot of ways to put your lands into play and have a lot of cards that are good in all situations. You can't have a card that's like, this is only good if I draw it in the early game.
Right.
Or this is only good if I draw it in the late game, because you're just not in control of what things you draw in any order.
Right. The most you probably have control of is putting the fetch lands in there. And if you have some way, there's so many cards like Courser and stuff that allow you to see the top card of your deck.
Right.
So it's similar to when people get stuck with their Ballista Citadel. You want ways to be able to manipulate what's going on up top, and sometimes it is just play something to draw another card out of it, but then you want to be able to make sure you can play those cards each time.
He's a real bing bong Ballista Citadel.
Bing bong Ballista Citadel.
That's what he is. You need to be prepared to deal with the eventuality that he's gonna get stuck.
Yeah.
Because that's sort of his whole thing.
That's Flubs.
So definitely all of the ways to play extra land drops, and I mean all of them. My list is running Enter the Unknown, which is target creature explores, you get an extra land drop.
Just to allow it to explore.
Just to get another land out of your hand and be able to cast a cheap spell.
And maybe move through the top of your deck too.
I put Mana Bond in my list, which is
oldie.
Awesome.
Yeah, when you go to your discard phase, you may choose to put all the lands from your hand onto the battlefield. If you do, you discard the rest of your hand, which you're already okay discarding, by the way.
Yeah, that's fine. We'll get new cards. He's not worried about it.
Yeah, I love that you put Summer Bloom on here.
It's incredible in this deck.
Yeah, it's such a powerful card. You can play up to 3 additional lands this turn.
So exploration, all of these things, they have a few things in common. Extra land drops, not putting lands from your hand into the battlefield. Even Growth Spiral is not as good because you're not in control of what's in your hand.
Yep.
And they're cheap. A really, really low curve in this deck is important because you don't know what you're going to draw when, and you don't want to be stuck with a card that's really expensive but not have hit your land drops or something like that.
Right.
So super low curve, and all of these are good basically all the time if you have a huge amount of card advantage.
Are you playing the Crucible Worlds and stuff in here as well, the ramming up excavators?
I don't think so.
Because you just want to go off the top, right?
You just want to keep going. You don't really care about what's in your graveyard. That's gone. There's a few things that we'll talk about that are okay in your graveyard to restart the chain, but I don't think lands are all that important for you.
Excellent. Okay, so how do we build this deck? Because now that I'm looking at it, I'm going, okay, all my ideas are just sort of not working. I feel foolish.
So I tried a few things. Okay. The first thing I was like, okay, what about cards that discard cards from your hand? That are just I clear out as an additional cost, I discard 3 cards.
You want to get to 0 in hand.
Yeah, what about that? And then I found that if you draw those cards late, you don't have any cards in your hand, so they don't do anything. So I scrapped all of that.
Okay.
And I found that what you really, really want to do is store your cards in somewhere that isn't your hand.
Okay.
You want ways to squirrel cards away, especially important ones that you can just store for the right time or when they're better, and then it gets your hand to 0 better than having additional costs as discards.
Yeah, you may not have cards in your hand, but there's other ways to cast it. It's an exile, or in this case, Jace Reawakened allows you to plot a card in your hand.
Yes, I think that's amazing in this deck. You can sort of incidentally create this wild board state with a couple cards we'll talk about later. So defending a Planeswalker is actually on the table, and being able to just plot a card from your hand where you're like, I really like this removal spell, or I really like this engine piece, but I don't want to commit it to the board right now.
Right.
Is very, very helpful. And it gives you a spell to cast later when you get stuck with a land in your hand that you can't play.
What if you want Chris Pine to come along and help you out?
He's super helpful. Sometimes you go on an adventure as a fool and you run into Chris Pine.
Which is Edgin Larsenus Lutenist, a human bard. That's kind of a rogue.
Yeah, he is roguish. It's each non-land card in your hand without Foretell has Foretell. Its Foretell cost is equal to its mana cost reduced by 2. So for Foretell, you always pay 2 to exile it, and then you just don't... You reduce the casting cost by that.
Yeah.
And then it says whenever you cast your second spell each turn, go target creature an opponent controls.
Sure.
It's nice for a little bit of defense, but we're talking about the like, oh, I found a win con, but I can't win the game with it right now.
Right.
I'm going to hide it in Foretell, and we'll deal with this later.
Yeah, and foretelling doesn't actually make you cast or play a land, so you don't discard as a result of foretelling either.
Neither does plotting. So there's like safe game actions, safe ways to use your mana without being forced to discard something you don't want to.
Very cool. And then you've got Bag of Holding, which is great. Whenever you discard a card, you exile that card from your graveyard, and then the Bag of Holding just holds on to it.
Yeah.
So 2 D&D cards actually back to back.
Right,
here.
back to back. The Bag of Holding is perfect for exactly this. You just keep the stuff in there that you can't use right now, and you'll crack it later when you run out of cards, or maybe Flubs is removed. Because the thing is, you do need cards.
Right.
But you just need to keep them somewhere that Flubs can't see them.
Yeah. Or Flubs doesn't realize that things are happening. He's just bumbling along. And it's like, plot, foretell. He's like, I don't know what that is.
I don't care. I'm having fun.
Yeah, exactly. I'm in the moment. I'm staying in the present moment.
Fibblethip, Lost on the Range, will let you plot cards from the top of your library. That's great. It's a great way to spend mana.
Super good, yeah.
The one thing that worries me about Fibblethip is the blue. Because this is weird. You're tapping mana blind.
Oh.
Because you don't know what you're going to draw, so you don't know what you have to prepare your mana for. So having 2 blue up for Fibblethip can sometimes be awkward.
Yeah. I mean, the reality chip I've seen being thrown around as well. Just a way to get things off the top of your library and to know what's coming up.
I also want to talk about Beergy, but more importantly, I want to talk about her horn.
Hornfell, Horn of Bounty, the backside of Beergy.
It says, discard a card, exile the top 2 cards of your library. You may play those cards this turn. So, like I said, it can get really awkward with Flubs if you have like 2 cards in hand, or if you have 4 cards in hand and you just want to make it odd again, or you want to turn a card you can't cast into more cards. Or you have a card in exile you want to cast, but you want to get some value out of the card in your hand. You can bin the card to the horn, get 2 additional cards that you can squirrel away in exile, and now you just have no cards in your hand and can cast everything. Right. So it gives you like an infinite churn of cards, and it turns Flub's 1 card draw into 2.
Yeah, and if you draw a land, you have no more land drops, discard it, exile 2, keep the thing going, now your hand's back to 0.
It's all about keeping Flubs walking.
Yeah, keep them bumbling along. This next one seems like the main card for every Flubs deck.
Every single time you have this on board, it's going to be insanely busted and confusing.
Yeah, so this is Aruth, Tormented Prophet, 1 a blue and a red, 2/4. If you would draw a card, instead exile the top 2 cards of your library, and you can play those cards this turn. So instead of drawing, you're turning every draw into an exile 2.
Right. And that's sort of what the horn does as well, but this is 3 mana, and it means that you don't get those cards gummed up in your hand. You just only have cards in exile, which means now every time you play a spell, you impulse draw 2 things.
Right.
If you have additional land drops, if you have lots of mana, like Flubs will cast a bunch of spells, and Ruth says, here's a bunch of spells.
And you just get it all into the board at that same turn. You never have to worry about the discard thing because you're just exiling when you're drawing those cards instead.
The other thing is like containment constructs, and those there's like 3 cards that live in that space. Whenever you discard a card, they get exiled. You can cast them this turn. Those are also quite good and are really good to play in the early game because you can discard lands, play those lands, and discard something else. And it sort of, again, hides those cards from Flubs, so he thinks you have fewer resources than you do.
That's hilarious. You're playing a mini game with Flubs the whole time.
Sort of against him, but also with him.
With him, yeah. You're all the fool in this case. Party Thrasher is another way to discard and create exiled cards. I really like Valakut Exploration here.
So Valakut Exploration
This is a win con, right?
It is a win con.
Yeah.
This deck is all gas, no payoff.
Yeah.
Because you're not in control of when you see the payoffs.
Right,
so you can't like play the payoff and then do all the stuff. You have to do all the stuff until you hit a payoff and then keep doing all the stuff.
Otherwise, you draw the payoff early, you're going to discard the payoff.
Right.
Or whatever, yeah.
So it can be really awkward. But Valakut Exploration is a card draw engine that's good in the beginning. And in the end, you can dump a whole bunch of cards in exile, and then when they go to the graveyard, you deal damage to each opponent or to target?
Yeah, that much damage.
Yeah, so if you have 6 cards in there, all of them go back to your graveyard and you deal 6 damage to all of your opponents.
Great with the landfall, too, if you're playing 3-4 lands a turn. So this could probably, on the big turn, deal 15, 16 damage to people, right?
Easy. Plus, it goes along with our exploration thing.
Aha! I do love that.
Top of library manipulation is actually really nice, especially in cheap iterations. I like Otherworldly Gaze has been surprisingly excellent.
Yeah, this card, it's finding more and more play, I think, as people realize how powerful it is.
It's a single blue to Surveil 3 that has flashback 1 and a blue, and it's at instant speed. So Otherworldly Gaze can set up the top and be like, no more lands, Flubs, no more lands.
Yeah.
But it's also a spell you can flashback from the graveyard to get the chain going again, or just to set up the next few draws to smooth things over as much as possible. It's also a free card to discard in the early game because it's flashback.
Kaz's flashback, yeah. I mean, you're going to find that a lot of cards that work good in the graveyard are going to be fun here.
Yeah. Wonder, anger, those kind of things are all very powerful as well. They're, again, a little weird because they work sort of strangely with all of your impulse draw. Like if you exile a Wonder to Eruth, it's a dead card, right? You're not going to cast your
not
Wonder.
So hot then.
So those kind of things fight each other a little bit, but a lot about Flubs fights each other a little bit.
Yeah, everything, this deck is like on such a precarious knife's edge of working and not working. Now, it seems that there are some people that are trying to build into Madness because you are discarding.
Yes. So here's my thought about Madness, is the cards are generally below quality.
Yeah.
They're a little overcosted. They work very weirdly with all this Cast from Exile stuff that we're talking about, with the most powerful stuff with rough Flubs, right? The Harnfell, Valakut Exploration, Eruth, those are the cards we're highest on.
So these kind of actually are a bit of a non-bow.
I actually don't like Madness at all. And I did try it in the early builds of Flubs to be like, oh, in the early game, I'll pitch a Fiery Temper and cast a Lightning Bolt. That seems pretty good. But when you impulse draw a Fiery Temper, or you
never want to pay 1 red.
Get it at the wrong time and you're in the middle of a chain, you don't want to pay the full cost for it. So that you're just not in control of when you're discarding and when you're drawing.
Yeah.
And with Madness, you need something like Anya that just gives you the draw consistently and all the time.
Yep, that makes sense. And there aren't that many great Madness cards in green, blue, and red that are really worth the payoff.
You're missing black, You're
missing black, with like the Shadow Fiend Grange and all that stuff.
So that's the build that I like the most. Play a ton of extra lands, cast stuff from exile, use your like Passionate Archaeologists and stuff to deal big amounts of damage, and use Storm off functionally. Or you use cards that pay you off from playing stuff from exile, like Faldorn that gives you wolves when you play lands and cast stuff from exile. That's how my deck functions.
Yeah.
But there's, again, you could do Storm payoffs. They're a little weird because you're not in control of when you draw them. It's all a little interesting, but you could take Flubs in so many different ways. And the most powerful version is with Cheerios.
Cheerio!
Which are 0 drops.
That's what Flub says. He goes, Cheerio!
Cheerio! You could build around artifacts and do like the artifact storm stuff. So with non-creature payoffs, like Firebrand Archers, you could also do like a Rise and Shine type of effect, where you're like, all of my Cheerios come to light.
Ah, they're 4/4s. Or
but again,
Awakener, similar,
you could draw it at a weird time and not have the Cheerios on board. So it's a little awkward. The Firebrand Archers are a little bit better. Or you could go the creature route and cast your Ornithopters, your Shield Spheres, and like Crimson Kobolds and all the Kobolds.
Yeah, because they're all 0 drops.
And
very cool.
Then you can do, again, Impact Tremors, Perforos, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
There's great ways to pick them all up. You can use Paradoxical Outcome and bounce all of your 0 drops and replay them all. That's sort of a move for when Flubs gets inevitably removed.
Yeah. So you have a game plan outside of Flubs being around. That makes sense.
And those will probably combo off with some sort of Cloudstone Curio type thing where you bounce the cobbled, play the cobbled, bounce the cobbled, play the cobbled,
just go
draw cards.
Yeah, I think there were versions of this deck that were winning with Thassa's Oracle and stuff, and the new Jace, or the not new anymore,
old Jace,
older,
one
slightly
blue,
newer,
blue.
slightly older, yeah.
Allurin is another thing that works well with the creature.
Oh,
thing,
yeah.
You can cast all your creatures for free. So if you get Allurin on the battlefield, which, in this deck is sort of easier said than done, now you can just cast creatures for free off the top of your library and go.
Yep.
So there's a lot of engine here. I think the biggest question with Flubs is just, what do you want to be doing with him? Where is he going?
Yeah.
Because he doesn't
This is your journey. Or it's his journey. You're just sharing in it.
He doesn't really care. So you have to figure out how you want to focus this deck.
It's so funny. I've never seen a card have such a relationship with the player before.
It feels like you're his handler.
Yeah. It's like he's like a little lemming and he's on the path and you're building little walls here. Like, no, you need to take a right. Go left here or whatever.
And he's like, wait, what?
Yeah, but Flubs is great. There's a ton of discussion about it online. There's 500 deck lists or something already. People trying to figure it out.
Yeah, he's the number 2 built commander right now, behind the Assassin's Creed guy.
Yeah. Good job, Flubs.
So Flubs is doing quite well. If you have a Flubs deck, I'm really curious to see it. There's a lot of different things you can be doing here. I've seen Dream Halls builds with it, where you can discard cards to cast spells for free.
Oh, yeah.
But that's a little awkward because you can get stuck with one card in hand. Everything is just a little weird.
And then everyone gets a Dream Hall's ability too. It's not just you.
I will say, once you've cracked Flubs, he's busted.
Yeah.
It's the kind of commander that, if you have a list, and it works well, it's going to be pretty high power, regardless of how much fast mana you're running.
Well, your average mana value in this deck is 1.5.
So cheap.
Right? Yeah.
It's sort of a storm deck, regardless of how you build it.
Yeah, because you want to get to 0 cards, and then you're just living off the top.
Yeah. So keep in mind, the Flubs needs to be managed and needs a steady hand.
And there are ways to play it in a very memey way as well. So I think you'll see a lot of people that... this is one of those decks where someone brings it, you're like, all right, is this a 9 or is this a 5? Right. Because it could be both.
I didn't mention it, but you should also put Song of Creation in this deck, of course, because Flubs himself is a Song of Creation.
Oh.
That's the you play an extra land drop, and whenever you cast a spell, you draw a card.
Draw a card, yeah. There you go.
Okay.
All right.
Let's move on to Gev, Scaled Scorch. This is a very different deck. Black and a red for a 3/2 lizard mercenary with ward, pay 2 life. Other creatures you control enter with an additional +1 counter on them for each opponent who lost life this turn. Whenever you cast a lizard spell, Gev deals 1 damage to target opponent.
Okay, so this makes all of your little dudes bigger.
Yeah.
An additional 1 counter for each opponent. So it's not going to be for the amount of damage. So if 3 opponents lost life, they all come in with 3 1/1 counters.
Yeah, which means you need the cheapest stuff that does damage to each of your opponents.
Yes.
Who lost life, yeah. So Spear Spewer is the first one I thought of. It's a 1 mana pinger that deals 1 damage to everybody.
Tap it and do it.
Shepherd of Rot, Creeping Bloodsucker, Limb Duels, Hex. We've talked about these kind of cards a lot. They're just cheap things that deal damage on upkeep and enable, or tap to deal damage that enable your engine.
Yeah, they just keep it going. Sanctum of Stonefangs is one of the shrines that does that, I believe.
Yeah, it's busted.
Makes people lose his X life. Yeah, you'll find similarities with this in the Teysa Opulent Oligarch. I forget the exact name of it.
Yeah, I think you're right. Yeah, because you just want each opponent to have lost 1 life at the beginning, and then it makes all your stuff bigger. It's a lot more aggressive than Teysa, of course, but a lot of the enablers look the same.
Yeah.
And you have the red pingers.
Yeah, and not to mention, too, these creatures, the Creeping Bloodsucker, when it comes in as a 4/5 or whatever, you're going to have a lot of beef. So even these small little things that don't seem that powerful, with the addition of the counters, will actually become real threats.
Gev is definitely a front foot deck. This is an aggressive attacking deck. You want to play efficient creatures that use those +1/+1 counters. I really like Florian in this deck.
Yeah.
So at the beginning of your post-combat main phase, look at the top X cards of your library, where X is the total amount of life your opponents lost this turn. Exile 1 of those cards and put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. You may play the exiled card this turn.
So you could be drawing a lot.
It draws you 1 card.
Yeah,
but you get to
huge
see
selection. Yeah.
But minimum, you're going to look at 3. You pick the best card out of it. Plus, it's a first striker, so it can come in as a 6/6 first strike on turn 3, depending on how your engine's been set up.
Right.
I sort of wonder if this deck runs rituals just to get stuff out as fast as possible, because you do want like an enabler, a pinger, a Gev, and a creature to benefit from that.
Right.
Basically 1, 2, 3.
Bit of an engine setup. But once you're there, you can really use those counters in a bunch of really interesting ways. A Walking Ballista where you cast it for 0 mana and comes in with 3 1/1 counters seems pretty darn good.
Yeah, even if you cast it for 2 and it comes in with 4 is just like a huge problem right away. Can pick off blockers and mana dorks and all that. There's a big old Walking Ballista in red and black called Deathbringer Thoktar. 4 black red. Whenever another creature dies, you may put a +1/+1 counter on the Thoktar, and then you remove a +1/+1 counter from it, and it deals 1 damage to target creature or player.
That's cool.
So it's a Walking Ballista that sort of generates its own counters as well.
Yeah, and if you have pingers that deal damage directly to creatures or players, then you could also kill them and then cast the Deathbringer Thoktar and have it enter with even more. Krenko, Tin Street Kingpin, just a little guy. So when he attacks, you put a 1/1 counter on it, and then you create a number of 1/1 red goblin creature tokens equal to Krenko's power. So
normally he feels a little slow, but if he comes in with 3 counters on him, then you're off to the races.
4 1/1s immediately. Yikes! Actually 5 because you'll put 3. He
it comes in with 3. Is equal to his power?
Yeah,
his power. You're right. Yeah.
So pretty powerful.
Fell Beast of Mordor is a new one. It's 2 black for new.
From Lord of the Rings.
It's got Flying and Devour 1. Whenever Fell Beast of Mordor enters the battlefield or attacks, target opponent loses X life and you gain X life, where X is the number of counters on it. So even if you don't devour anything, this can come in with 3, and every time it attacks, it starts doming people and gaining life. It's a huge flying threat that you can absolutely scare people with.
Yeah, and it's also a Fell Beast of Mordor. It's one of the scariest things out there.
It's pretty sweet.
Yeah, you lose. You immediately lose. Nikara, Lair Scavenger, whenever another creature you control leaves the battlefield, if it had a counter on it, 1 or more, you draw a card, then you lose 1 life. So just a little bit of an insurance policy. Speaking of insurance policies, we got a couple.
The Ozolith is a big one. You can store those counters away, put them on Gev when he enters next. You can redistribute however you choose.
Walking Ballista. Yeah.
Your Thoktar.
And you're accumulating them slowly across the game, and each time it's getting 3. Yeah, that's pretty cool.
This is a pretty sweet Agatha Soul Cauldron deck. Not only is it the card just incredible, it hands out +1/+1 counters and exiles stuff from graveyards, and it grants them all activated abilities of the exiled cards.
Yeah.
But in a deck with Walking Ballista and the Thoktar and maybe even Triskelion, you can now give all of your creatures with +1/+1 counters on them those abilities and start really, really throwing some damage around.
Yeah, that's cool because you can the Spell Slingers or whatever, or the Spewers or whatever, those are shared around. That's cool.
All of your pinging abilities. There's a lot of upsides to Agatha Soul Cauldron in this deck, so I love a reason to put it in.
Yeah, Uncivil Unrest is a card that grants each creature Riot, non-token creatures, and then if they have a 1/1 counter on it, if you'll deal damage, it deals double that damage instead. So this is a way to kill very quickly. Because dealing damage, by the way, on your Spewer, that means it's dealing 2 each time.
There you go. That's pretty sweet.
There you go. This reminds me a lot of, I think I'm going to put Gev into my Marchesa deck, because it's just more ways to get 1/1 counters on creatures.
Yeah.
You gotta love it.
Lizards. Let's talk about them. There's actually some very cool ones. All of the Viashinos were just errated to be lizards, so there's a huge bunch of new lizards. Well, the old lizards, but they're newly lizards.
Yeah, they were lizards all along, yes.
They were lizards all along.
It was Agatha all along.
I know. Ketis Emberclaw Familiar is an elemental lizard that says when you deal combat damage with your commander, you deal it to all opponents.
I love that. Lizard Blades. It's an equipment lizard.
It's also so good to put counters on.
Yeah, it's a 1/1 double striker, and then you can equip it to a creature to give it double strike. So it just becomes a 4/4 double striker. And it's a lizard, so you get the other sort of trigger on the ability. Yeah, that's great.
Hissing Iguanar is a lizard. Whenever another creature dies, you may have Hissing Iguanar deal 1 damage to target player or planeswalker. So this is in more of a go-wide build, but it's going to come in as a 6/4 lizard that deals out even more damage if things start dying. I don't think necessarily this is an aristocrat build, but extra damage is extra damage.
Yeah, you want to get that damage through as fast as possible, otherwise you're in trouble. Laughing Jasper Flint is a really fun lizard. This card is nuts. It makes all of your creatures that you don't own but do control, so if you steal creatures, which you will be doing, they become mercenaries, and then at the beginning of your upkeep, you exile the top X cards of target opponent's library, and you just get those X cards, where X is the number of outlaws you control, so any rogues are encountered. Is there commander or rogue? No, it's not. It's just a lizard.
I think it's just a lizard. Oh, mercenary!
Oh, it's a mercenary!
We did it!
That's why Laughing Jasper.
That was my plan.
Yeah, and so you would, with Laughing Jasper Flint and your commander, you get 2 cards off someone's library, and if you cast any of those creatures, they are also mercenaries, so you just get to keep this train going.
Not to mention he's huge with all these counters.
7/6 or whatever. He's really laughing at that point.
Yeah, I like this card a lot in the deck. There's a lot of lizards that are actually quite good. Spitfire Lagak is like a lizard that has a pinger ability on it, and there's a ton of new lizards in Bloomburrow that go right into this deck.
But of course.
Iridescent Vine Lasher is whenever a land you control enters the battlefield, it deals 1 damage to target opponent. And then the new Agate Instigator is 1 in a red for a lizard rogue with offspring, 1 in a red, so 4 mana to cast it with offspring. Whenever another creature you control enters, this creature deals 1 damage to each opponent. Again,
it's what the deck wants
lizards
to do.
love to ping. They love it.
And that's how this deck wins, is you're just pinging over and over and over
You
again.
probably put a Torbrand in here to enhance all of these pinging. It's good with all of your things that tap to deal damage. It's good with all these lizards that deal damage when stuff enters and dies. And you're just trying to be faster than everyone. It's an aggro lizard deck.
Yeah, and when you give all your creatures +3/+3 counters, you're going somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
Cool.
Those are the commanders we're going to talk about for now. We have a lot more to talk about, including even more frogs, and we're going to get into some of the like giant elemental monsters after a few words from our sponsors.
So, Rachel, do you think that Magic will ever become an Olympic sport?
Maybe. We've already got all the medals, right? We've got gold tokens, silver borders, a bronze walrus.
Yep.
Plus, what's a 4-hour commander game if not the marathon of tabletop?
And just like in a real marathon, it's important to stay hydrated, especially in those long, grindy games. That's why I always bring with me Liquid IV, which is America's #1 powdered hydration brand. Liquid IV hydrates better than water alone, with 3 times the electrolytes of the leading sports drink, plus 8 vitamins and nutrients.
And hydration isn't just for physical athletes. It's essential for overall health and the mental clarity Magic players need to compete at peak performance.
Liquid IV comes in a ton of delicious flavors like pear or strawberry lemonade that couldn't be easier to tear, pour, and enjoy. So it's the perfect way to up your game, whether you're trying to find the right line or training to be an Olympic breakdancer.
Wait, they have breakdancing at the Olympics now? Pretty good.
Yeah, I was going to do a head spin, but I have good hair today.
Oh, that's why.
Turn your ordinary water into extraordinary hydration with Liquid IV. Get 20% off your first order of Liquid IV when you go to liquidiv.com and use code COMMAND at checkout. That's 20% off your first order when you shop Better Hydration today using promo code COMMAND at liquidiv.com.
Greetings, loyal subjects! I am Kenrith, the returned king! Some less regal commanders force you to build a complex engine or sling together spells to achieve victory. It's all very tedious and exhausting. Not me, though. I'm all about those easy wins, baby! That's why I switched to Mint Mobile for a premium wireless service at just $15 a month. Making the switch couldn't be easier! No hoops to jump through or stacks effects to dodge. Just go online, purchase, and activate! Now I'm saving a ton of money while getting high-speed data and unlimited talk and text all on the realm's largest 5G network. It's service fit for a king at a price fit for a pauper player. And if you'll excuse me, I have to go reanimate the creatures my opponent spent all the resources destroying. See? Easy.
To get this new customer offer and your new 3-month premium wireless plan for just $15 a month, go to mintmobile.com/command. That's mintmobile.com/command. Cut your wireless bill to $15 a month at mintmobile.com/command. $45 upfront payment required, equivalent to $15 a month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Speed slower, above 40 gigabytes on unlimited plan. Additional taxes, fees, and restrictions apply. See Mint Mobile for details.
All right, my new deck list is complete. Now, let's see which cards I don't already own and buy them.
Wait. How'd you do that without going through a million boxes?
Oh, I just use ARCHIDEKT. They make it super easy to upload and manage your collection. Then, when you're done brewing a deck, you can sort it by collection status to see what you already have.
So this group is just cards you don't own?
Yep, I just click buy this stack, and it takes me right to Card Kingdom.
Whoa.
ARCHIDEKT is the best place to browse, brew, and playtest commander decks. Just go to archidekt.com/commandzone to get started.
That's ARCHIDEKT.com/command zone.
Welcome back, everybody. It's time to talk about more cute creatures and terrifying ones from Bloomburrow. First up, we got Helga, Skittish, Seer, Bant.
She's a cute one.
She is a cutie. This is green, white, blue for a 1/3. Whenever you cast a creature spell with mana value 4 or greater, you draw a card, gain a life, and put a 1/1 counter on Helga. You can also tap Helga and add X mana of any one color, where X is Helga's Power. Spend this mana only to cast creature spells with mana value 4 or greater, or creature spells with X in their mana cost. So you want to cast big time spells in this deck and 4 or greater. You also have like cards like Garrick's Uprising and that care about creatures with power 4 or greater.
Yeah.
Typically, spells that you cast with 4 or greater in green are going to be on that side of things.
Probably, yeah.
So you just want to kind of storm off with this deck is what I'm thinking. You want to play big time stuff.
I love this thought you had about multiple Helgas.
Yeah, so one Helga's great. What if you Spark Doubled it or Sakashima did? Spark Double's great because it comes in with a 1/1 counter, I think.
Yeah.
And is already off to the races. And now every time you cast a mana value 4 or greater creature, you gain multiple instances of life card draw, and then you have multiple creatures that you can tap to add a ton of mana.
Not to mention the clones are 4-mana creatures that will draw you the card off your original Helga.
That's right.
You're so clever.
It's a party.
You're so clever. It's just only Helgas in the building.
Only Helgas for sure. So let's talk about some X spells. We'll just run through them. We got Hydroid Krasis, which is a huge, giant Hydra. You've got all the Hydras, Goldbean Hydra, Lifeblood Hydra. And then you got your Walking Ballistas and stuff like Goose Mother. Notably, when you spend mana on an X spell, the mana value is equal to the total mana you spend on it.
So for Walking Ballista, if his X is 2, you will draw the card off of Helga, get the counter on Helga, that kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly. And then, notably, Walking Ballista has a great mana sink, but you cannot use Helga for that. It's only to cast creatures with mana value 4 or greater or X spells. You're probably playing Unbound Flourishing, an Elementalist palette in this deck, which is just every time you do the X thing, you double it. So I think this is actually a really powerful commander because of the ability to untap Helga.
Yes. Anytime you can untap Helga and benefit from the spell you just cast with Helga and untap or do it again is going to make the deck feel super, super snowbally. And there's a lot of great ways to do that, specifically in Simic.
Yeah.
My favorite way is Kiora Behemoth Beckoner.
Yeah, so this already does the Garrick's Uprising thing.
Right.
Whenever a creature with power 4 or greater enters, you draw a card. Great. So you can draw multiple cards of Helga, and then you use -1 it to untap target permanent. No one ever kills Kiora.
Never do. You will
look
use.
at Kiora and you're like, cool.
You will
Use it.
minus that 6 times.
Yeah.
And
Maybe
if-
at some point someone's like, all right, here comes my 1/1 flyer or
And
something.
you draw cards off of it
Yeah.
and untap stuff. This card is busted. It's extremely powerful, and it's really, really good in this deck. Her follower is also good.
Kiora's follower.
Tap, untap, target permanent.
Yeah, so this is great just for lands and stuff as well. Here's the thing. Once you have Helga at like 4 or 5 power, tapping it once, untapping it, tapping again, that's 9 plus mana or whatever at that point in the game. So I was thinking if you're going to be running the untapping package, there are some other really powerful cards you could be putting in here. Like Faeral Elder is a card that already taps for as many color among the permanents you control, how many colors you have. So tap
3
for
in this
3.
deck,
Yeah, and you're going to have untappers. And then an oldie but a goodie is Kaidel, Chosen of Krufix, where you add a colorless to your mana pool for each other card you've drawn, for each card you've drawn this turn.
Yeah.
So Helga's drawing you cards, you're untapping, you're casting more things, drawing more cards. At some point, Kaidel is going to tap for also 3, 4, 5, 6 or more.
Kaidel seems great, especially in the X spell version of this deck. You just have infinite resources to put into that X.
Yeah.
We haven't really mentioned it, but there are also ways to just put counters on Helga.
Yes.
Like you can put the Ozolith in this deck. You can put like Doubling Season in this deck. Just ways to maximize how fast Helga gets. Big anyway. These are great colors for +1/+1 counters.
There's also power and toughness doublers that exist in green. There's a lot of those. So
it's
now,
going to be easy to make dozens of mana with your commander.
yeah, and you want to be doing the creature-based versions for sure. So like Zopandrel over there's like a 1 green enchantment or whatever that does a similar thing. So because the creature versions you can cast with Helga, and then when it gets to combat on your turn, you're doubling her power, and now she's going from a 5 to a 10. You can see where this gets nuts because you tap, play something huge, find a way to untap her. You have a Sting of the Glinting Dagger, whatever it is.
This is also shockingly an intruder alarm deck.
No way! Yeah, and
We
so
broke it.
Let's talk. Yeah. Oh, you broke Helga is a common joke that's already going around. So there are a lot of combos in this deck. Some people are saying this is like the Bant version of Animar, which I see a lot of comparisons to, and it makes sense. So Ancestral Statue is a big one. It's a 4 mana creature that says when it enters the battlefield, you return a non-land permanent you control to its owner's hand. So if that's another card you can recast, then great. Actually, it's not another. It's return a non-land permanent.
Usually you return the Ancestral Statue itself.
The Ancestral Statue, yeah. So then you're just going to need an Intruder Alarm type effect that when it comes in, you untap Helga to do it again. You can go infinite at that point because you can keep replaying the card over and over again.
Venture will bounce himself as well.
Venture will bounce himself. Chakram Retriever is this elemental hound if you want to keep with the animals. It says whenever you cast a spell during your turn, untap target creature.
Which creature, Jimmy?
Clearly the Chakram Retriever, so he can keep retrieving. But yeah, this is 100% a combo deck if you want it to be. I think there probably will be some CEDH viable versions of this. If you have Food Chain and Mist Hologriffin, you go infinite immediately. This is no surprise to anyone, of course.
Draw your whole deck with it.
Draw your whole deck, yeah. Cloudstone Curio, hooray. Again, you can find all the Animar combo pieces that exist that just aren't, that can fit into a green-blue version of this deck. So like Great Oak Guardian is as well.
Yeah, you're also in white, so you have all of the tutors for you have all green for all the tutors for creatures. You have white for all the tutors for, we've talked all about a lot of enchantments and artifacts. Walking Ballista, Intruder Alarm, Food Chain, Cloudstone Curio, all of those are easy to tutor in white.
Yeah, so I was thinking about this, and I'm like, is this a Karuga the Macro Sage deck?
I love that.
It's not great if you make it an X-Spell deck because a lot of the X-Spells do not have mana value 3 or greater.
Right, yeah.
On their front side. So if you're doing the non-X-Spell version of this deck, I think you can actually make a Karuga deck.
Yeah. And Karuga is even more card draw and a thing you can cast with Helga, right? It enters the battlefield, it draws a card for each other permanent you control with converted mana cost 3 or greater, which is Helga and all the creatures you've cast thus far.
Yeah.
Helga's interesting because it's not the kind of deck that you have to worry about overcommitting to the board because she's like, you committed to the board, here's more board.
Here's more board.
You committed to the board, here's more board.
Yeah. And we see this a lot with Bant sometimes, that it's just like, wow, will you ever stop drawing cards? I don't think so.
It's very, very powerful. This frog has legs.
Hop to it.
All right.
All right. Next up is another really powerful deck here.
It's
Lumra, Bellow of the Woods, and it's mono green. Would you believe it? This has the ability to just completely stomp face.
Yeah. I mean, this card seems busted. It's 4 green for a legendary elemental bear. It has star power and toughness. It has vigilance and reach, so you're not getting through it.
Yep.
Lumra's power and toughness are equal to the number of lands you control. Okay. And then when Lumra enters the battlefield, mill 4 cards, then return all land cards from your graveyard to the battlefield tap.
All land cards?
It's just...
all of them? Not even the ones you mill? Not just the ones you mill? All of them?
No. All of them.
So yeah, this is what we call this powerful.
Yeah, I mean, this is going to give you a ton of landfall triggers. It's going to give you a ton of mana, and it's something that you can do repeatedly because it's in your command zone. Did we mention that she's huge?
Yeah, she'll come in as a vigilance reach like 20/20 sometimes. Yeah.
So the first thing we got to do is put some lands in your graveyard.
Yeah, so cards like Mulch aren't good in this scenario because Mulch will put the lands in your hand, but you want mill cards that are going to accelerate you towards Lumra, so you're preparing for the beast in your graveyard. So Malevolent Rumble, for instance, is a new one that came out. Reveal the top 4, you can put a permanent from them into your hand. Probably not a land, honestly, because you're going to have a lot of lands already. And then you put the rest in your graveyard, and you make a 0/1 Eldrazi that ramps you.
Sweet.
Again, you want ramp that benefits what you're doing and creates an ideal situation. So even crop rotation, I think, is great in this deck.
Yeah.
Because you're sure you're playing replacing a land 1 for 1, but you get to tap that land for mana beforehand, so you get to use it.
Yeah,
but more importantly,
nick those.
Yeah, exactly. You're putting a land in your graveyard, and you want as many of those as possible. So Roiling Regrowth and Tish Restoration are all versions of Harrow, basically. And then I love this. You get to use your Boseiju as early as you want.
Hey, slam it.
Because you're going to get it back as a land,
Don't worry,
everybody.
It's coming back later.
Yeah.
Lotus Fields are great. Comes in, sacks some lands, put them in your graveyard, and you get a land that taps for 3 mana.
Yep.
And then, of course, fetch lands. Any land that sacrifices itself or has some utility to sacrifice itself is going to be great in this deck. I know you're one color, but if you can get lands in your graveyard, you're in business.
Yeah, and these lands are not as great because the next one we're going to talk about, like Strip Mine, Ghost Quarter, because you're losing a mana when you use it. But if you're already ramping a ton and you're going to get Lumra out before, then having an additional way to, again, keep your opponents back a little bit because you know you're going to Roiling Regrowth and get a bunch more lands out is really powerful.
Love the cycling lands in here, too. I think this is a big Tranquil Thicket deck.
Oh, yeah.
Cycle
Any land you can put in there.
It. Now you've got 5-6 lands in your graveyard. You cast your commander and you get up 6 mana. I mean, talk about paying for your commander tax. I think you're covered.
Yeah, you're definitely covered in this deck. This is the kind of deck I think if you do it right, you're playing Lumra on turn like 4 or 5, and then you're going to have 12 mana the next turn.
I mean, after putting some sort of landfall payoff on the battlefield, right?
Yeah, exactly. So more ways to get Lumra's thing, which is put all your lands on the battlefield. There are a lot of ways of doing it in case you want a redundant effect here, which is like Aftermath Analyst, which had a huge explosion recently in Standard, I think.
Card's busted. It's awesome.
Yeah, it mills 3 when it comes in. You can pay 4 to sack and put all the lands back on the battlefield tapped. Splendid Reclamation does a similar
Blended
thing.
Reclamation. I called it Sudden Reclamation.
It is sudden, but it is a sorcery, so I
Yes.
guess it's slightly less sudden.
That's true.
Blossoming Tortoise is a great card in this deck, similar thing. I really like this one, Rampant Gargantua. I'm looking to Frogantua, sorry. I'm looking to play this card as much as I can. It's 2 and a green for a 3/3 trample. Gets +10/+10 for each player who has lost the game.
Sweet.
So this could be a 33/33.
Cool.
Well, when you win the game.
Yeah, 23/23.
But when you win the game, it becomes a 33/33.
Depends on how many people you're playing against.
That's a good point. Yeah, 5-player pods. Go
There
nuts.
you go.
But when this deals combat damage to a player, you may mill that many cards and then put any number of land cards from among them on the battlefield tapped.
Pretty sweet.
I love it. World Shaper again is another card that does a similar thing, puts all this stuff on the battlefield.
Yeah, I mean, this is awesome. I like anything that is lower curve than your commander, right? Because you have a top end commander that's you're slamming as like your Haymaker commander. So a lot of what your deck is going to be is setup pieces that make way for this giant bear that's coming.
And it's so hard to interact with this opponent.
A ton of them mill too. Blossoming Tortoise, Rampant Frogantua, Aftermath Analyst are all doing what the deck wants to do naturally before your bear shows up.
Yeah, and when the bear shows up, better hope you have a couple of landfall payoffs, like I said earlier. So a Lotus Cobra is busted. Tireless Provision or Lotus Cobra basically give you a mana for every single land that comes in.
Right.
Play Lumra, get 7 lands in, add 7 mana, do whatever you want with it. That's how this deck really explodes and gets to the races. If you
I love this next inclusion.
Territory Color?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's one of my favorite cards from Modern Horizons draft. It has landfall. Whenever a land enters the battlefield, you can look at the top card of your library. If it's a creature, you may reveal it and put it into your hand. If you don't put it into your hand, you can instead put it into your graveyard.
It's like reverse explore, kind of.
Yeah.
Which is sweet. That's like exactly what you want, right? You can mill all your lands, you can draw all your creatures, and you have a huge landfall payoff.
Yeah.
And it's a 7/5 reach.
Yeah, for 5 mana. This card,
What are they doing?
If they printed this card, let's say 5 years ago, this would be a mythic rare.
It's insane.
Right?
Yeah. It's so powerful.
If you are into Scoot Swarm, good for you. This is the deck for it.
Yep.
A card that you're probably going to hear a lot about coming up is Springheart Nantuko.
This card's so powerful.
Yeah, this might be one of the best green creatures ever created, as far as I'm concerned. So you can bestow it for 1 in a green, gives it +1/+1. And then it's a little confusing, but whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, you can pay 1 in a green if it's bestowed onto a creature. If you do, you create a token that's a copy of the creature it's bestowed onto. So if it's on like a territory color, you get another territory color. Now, if you didn't create a token this way, you just automatically get a 1/1 green insect without having to pay anything.
You just still get a guy.
Yeah, so it's just very powerful in creating bodies. And if you don't want to pay the 1 in the green to create a copy of whatever it's on, you just still get a body, which is awesome.
Yeah, this card's incredible. And then if there's a board wipe, you keep your Springheart Nantuko if it's bestowed.
Yeah, and then at that point, it just becomes a landfall creature that makes a 1/1. So it's like a mini Scoot Swarm in a way.
There's always cool things that you can do with lands. Like if you're using like Amulet of Vigor, untapping stuff is really powerful with your commander because all those lands do enter tapped, and if they untap.
Yeah, I would say Amulet of Vigor is definitely included in this deck. If you want to do the mono green version, it's Spelunking. When it enters the battlefield, you draw a card, then you can put a land card. If it's a cave, you gain some life, but more importantly, lands you control enter the battlefield untapped.
Sweet.
Yeah, pretty powerful, especially because you're probably going to be playing again your Evolving Wilds and all that stuff, Terramorphic Expanses.
Tons of fetches, yeah.
And you want to ramp out fast, get Lumra out, and start beating face. There are some cool land tricks I think would be really good in this deck. So this is kind of a controversial, but you can play Urborg in this deck. You can play Urborg in any deck, actually, because it's not actually a swamp. It says
doesn't tap for black.
Doesn't tap for black. It just says each land is a swamp in addition to its other types. In addition, you can also play Yavimaya in this deck, as well as any deck.
Yeah, it's not actually a swamp until it hits the battlefield.
Exactly. And then it's like, what are you doing there?
Wait, what?
Yeah. So if you have this in your deck, I think you can run the package of basically any of the new Capenna lands.
There's tons of them.
Yeah,
just all the ones that search for a green.
Yeah, so Broker's Hideout is one that we'll mention here.
Cabaret, Courtyard, River, Tears, Outlook.
Yeah, any of them that have green in it, right? So when it enters the battlefield, you sacrifice it, and when you do, you search your library for a forest, plains, or island, put it on the battlefield, tapped, shuffle, gain a life. So there is a way, if you have a Yavimaya or Urborg out, where you play Broker's Hideout, the trigger goes on the stack to sacrifice it. You can tap it for a green or black to add that mana, and then it's going to find that land for you.
Sweet.
So you actually get a mana from it the turn it comes out. I think this is a deck that does not hurt itself by running a random Urborg in there because you're a landfall deck already, kind of.
I also like that these search even when they come in tapped.
Yeah,
so you can reanimate them from the graveyard. They hit, sacrifice themselves immediately, give yourself 2 more landfall triggers off of your commander.
And that's what the Aftermath Analyst deck, the Teamer one that was doing in Standard, was like, cool, we're going to bring it back. We're going to get every basic out of our deck. So you will have to run a lot of basics, but this is mono green. So
that's my question is how many lands do you run in this?
Oh man, I'm thinking 44, 5 almost.
That's where I am too.
Yeah, it should be almost half your deck.
You want to be milling a huge amount of lands to get the maximum impact. And if you're doing the kind of filtering or the kind of recursion that we're talking about, it's just totally fine if you run 45 lands.
Yeah, and then you play a graveyard package. So Life from the Loam is the obvious one to get lands back, but you also have like Noxious Revival and all that. You have Shigeki, Jukai Visionary, which is a really good card in this kind of deck, Wildest Dreams. And then the new card I'm trying to now put into a lot of decks is 6. So
I love 6.
Where's Ren at? Who cares?
Doesn't matter. 6 is sweet.
So 2, 4, 6 for 2 and the 3, 2 in the green.
It's like when you're hanging out with a couple, and they break up, and you're like, "Well, we're still gonna hang out with 6,
right? Yeah. I mean, did you see? It's a 2/4. It adds up to 6. It's just perfect. So this is a 2/4 with reach for 2 in the green. Whenever 6 attacks, you mill 3 cards, and you can put a land from among them into your hand. Great. And then, as long as it's your turn, non-land permanent cards in your graveyard have retrace. So you can discard a land, and then you can recast a permanent card from your graveyard.
Oh, so good.
By just paying its regular mana cost, yeah. So good. Because, again, if you have 45 lands in this deck, you're probably going to have some more lands in your hand.
Turn them into regrowths.
Yeah, exactly. Shifting Woodland is a new land that allows you to copy stuff in your permanents in your graveyard, and you can
just
only
have to hit Delirium.
Delirium, yeah, which should be pretty easy in this deck.
I would think so.
And then the card that I excitedly typed to you in Slack the other day to ask if you had an extra, because I knew you did.
Yep.
Is Paradise Lost. I didn't realize this card does what it does. I think I talked about it maybe back when we did unset stuff, but I forgot.
Yeah.
And now I'm like,
it's easy to forget how powerful this card is.
This card is nuts.
It says roll 2 6-sided dice. Return any number of cards with total mana value X or less from your graveyard to your hand, where X is the total of those results. Exile Paradise Lost. And I know you look at that and you're like, oh no, what if I roll a 2?
Well, this is 5 mana for an instant, by the way. I can't believe it's an instant.
Yep.
Any number of cards with total mana value X or less. That's every single land in your graveyard, should you decide to. Because it's the way it's formatted, and maybe they didn't intend for it to be this way.
I think they did. It's 5 mana.
I mean, but 5 mana return all. I mean, I guess in certain cases it's great.
There's the flashback one that says return all of one type to your hand.
Right.
That's 5 mana. That's sorcery speed, but it's not quite as flexible as Paradise Lost. If you roll a 7, which is just the middle,
oh my gosh,
you get 2 things back on every land.
Yeah, pretty good. So you don't have to worry about lands in your graveyard. I think you do Paradise Lost, and then you like Zurin Orb as well in this deck. Ways to sacrifice lands, I think, is really exciting in this deck. So
I agree.
That's just so much fun.
Float all the mana, you sack all your lands, you cast
like
your
Lumra,
commander,
and they'll come back.
And that rules.
That rules.
You do need to have a landfall trigger or something that cares about that. You just run a Field of the Dead.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's the kind of land deck that I really like, which is a little bit more risky. Mm-hmm. It's a little bit more like sack everything, play everything. It's
hope they
bigger.
Don't counter you, yeah.
And you're like, if they counter you, you're like, we'll try it again.
Yeah, we'll do it again next turn. Hopefully I don't have any mana left.
Maybe you run a Cavern of Souls naming Bear. I don't know.
There you go. Yeah,
I don't know.
I think it's a great idea.
That kind of thing is what this deck is going to really do at its top end if you're feeling the most feisty.
Yeah, and it's mono green. Like you're in this game to do this kind of thing. So Zurin Orb allows you to sack your lands to gain life. Sylvan Safekeeper allows you to sack lands to give creatures Shroud.
The biggest thing with Sylvan Safekeeper is you can't activate it tons of times.
Yeah, you have to do it in response to its own activation before they get Shroud.
It's all on top. So you have to do all of your sacking on top of it, and you guess you could target the Sylvan Safekeeper.
Yeah, that's
and
true.
just wait and not let any of them resolve.
Yeah. Or you basically can only do it to one creature one time. Once it has Shroud, you can't target it either.
Yeah.
And then Constant Mists is just a card that you would probably play in the Thickets of Fog that you get to buy back by sacking a land. So how do you win the game? Well, you can do it with your commander or without your commander in the set deck. With your commander, well, the main thing that you need, I think, is a Concordant Crossroads.
Yeah, this is an explosive deck that your opponents are going to have to answer immediately, so haste is going to be extremely important.
Yeah. And then your commander doesn't have trample, so like a Brawn in the graveyard.
I love that because you mill it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like Garrick's Uprising that we talked about before.
Mm-hmm. And then you have cards like Early Harvest, which is 1 green, target player untaps all basic lands they control. So just another way to get the extra mana to have that big turn. Mm-hmm. And then with your commander, you have unblockable options out there. Mm-hmm. Whisper Silk Cloak. This card is going to go in so many decks.
It's already spiked in price.
Yeah, Brotherhood Regalia. Equipped creature has Ward 2, is an assassin, and can't be blocked. And equip legendary creature for 1, or regular equip cost for 3.
Assassin, Bear, Elemental.
Yeah, pretty sick.
Picture it in the Regalia.
Yeah.
And then it's worth all the money.
Shing! Has the few little knives come out. And if you're not doing your commander, then you have cards like Titania, Protector of Argoth, or the other Titania is the new one that does a similar thing, creates creatures when you have lands enter the graveyard. You could finally win with Avenger of Zendikar.
I mean, they would be so big.
They would be
The plants
huge.
would be alive.
Yeah, exactly.
Or, of course, Bristly Bell.
Bristly Bell.
That's the thing about landfall, especially in mono green, is there's a lot of ways that you can win the game.
Yeah.
You can Rampaging Baloths, you can Scoot Swarm. There's a lot of payoffs for a ton of lands entering the battlefield all at once.
Yeah.
You could even do the elemental one, the Royal.
Roiling Regrowth?
No,
Roiling.
Zendikar's Royal?
Make 2/2s?
Make elementals.
Yeah.
You're going to have a lot of creatures entering, or lands entering the battlefield.
Yep.
All right.
Exciting.
That's Lumra. Mono green is busted.
Mono green has always been busted.
It has
and
always been
This is just
busted.
another busted mono green card. Now let's talk about the handsomest card in the set.
It is the handsomest card in the set. It's Mr. Foxglove.
If this didn't get you going, then I don't know what will.
Look at him. He's so dapper.
He's so
Even the bat in the
dapper.
background is in love with him. Look. It's like, here I am with my fruit basket, just admiring Mr. Foxglove.
There goes Mr. Foxglove.
Oh, his tail.
This card's busted.
2
too.
green, white blue for a 3/5 Fox Rogue with lifelink. Whenever Mr. Foxglove attacks, draw cards equal to the number of cards in defending player's hand minus the number of cards in your hand. So you draw up to their hand size. Mm-hmm. And if you didn't draw cards this way, you may put a creature card from your hand onto the battlefield. Couple things to note here. It's a 5-mana commander in Bant that has to attack to do anything.
Yeah, it's like Rafik. Yeah, it's going to be risky.
So it's a little slow, and it just have some scary words on it.
Yeah. I mean,
However, they are sweet words.
they're super sweet words.
And look at his tail.
It's Mr. Foxglove.
He knows all the Eldrazi.
He does. Yeah, so cheating, Mr. Show and Tell is what some people have been calling him.
Mr. Show and Tell.
Because he is, it kind of matches, right?
Mr. Show and Tell.
Da-da-da-da. Yeah, so 5 mana, obviously attacking and just drawing up to someone else's hand is great.
Yep.
At that point, no one's scared of you. When you have a lot of cards in your hand, then people will kill Mr. Foxglove, which is very sad. But if you want to draw a bunch of cards, you have like Teferi's Ageless Insight and Alhammar's Archive, which are going to double the cards you're drawing. So if Rachel has 7 cards, I have 3. I'm going to draw 8 cards now instead.
I like this include. I don't normally love an abundance.
Me neither.
But
This deck feels like it's good though.
But I agree that like this is going to replace. So abundance says if you would draw a card, you may choose a land or non-land card, and you basically reveal until you get either a land or a non-land card. In this deck, you want to have the threat in your hand, and you're going to be drawing a lot of cards naturally.
Yeah.
So abundance just helps you dig for a threat. If you say non-land, 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 there's Jin Guitar.
There it is. Yep.
You know, it's going to help you, the deck, just work a little bit better and mean that you don't have to play a ton of 10 drops to actually make this work.
Another card I think is hilarious in this deck is Forced Fruition.
This is wild.
So-
this is always a crazy card.
Whenever an opponent plays a spell, that player draws 7 cards. So this is like, the game is going to end very, very quickly, depending
It is
on
a
the quadrant.
6-mana enchantment. So
Yeah, this is like the memeiest card you can play in this deck because if you have Forced Fruition out and then you attack with your commander or someone, they've drawn already, let's say,
14 cards.
21 cards.
21 cards.
Yeah, and Now, they may have to discard, but this is just funny because at the very least, they're at 7, I think, right? And so you get to draw up to that.
I mean, there's a lot of reliquary towers running around these days, whether they should be or not.
Now, what I do like about this deck is that you want to be able to be in a position where you can get rid of cards in your hand as well, so that you make sure that you either draw up, or if it's someone's like, oh, he's so scary, don't let Mr. Foxglove attack me. Like, actually, I'm just drawing cards with it this time. Yeah. So there's a little bit of politicking there.
Having control over your hand size is a really big deal in this deck, and I actually do like this section a whole lot.
Yeah.
Ayula's Influence lets you discard land cards to make 2/2 bears. You could also run spells that just are like pitch cost spells. Abolish is a cheap one. It's 1 white for an instant. You may discard a Plains card rather than paying Abolish's mana cost and destroy target artifact or enchantment.
Yeah, there's a good chance you're just drawing so many cards in this deck anyway, right?
You could run all the expensive elementals. Like you can run like your free Force of Wills and all of that stuff, or Solitudes. But also just like Commandeer is pretty sweet.
Oh, yeah.
Is Commandeer the one that
you can discard two blue spells? Yeah.
Obviously, you have to be sort of color-focused to be able to do those reliably, but those are great when you have a guaranteed draw, or at least a predictable amount of draw in your command zone.
Yeah, you've got the Jodzi, Oracle of Arcavios, and the Backside's Journey to the Oracle, which is 2 green sorcery. You can put any number of land cards from your hand on the battlefield. Then if you control 8 or more lands, you can discard a card and you return Journey to the Oracle to its owner's hand.
Yeah, this card's fun.
So it's just a way to sort of like play that kind of game. Now, obviously, you don't want to play this card Mind Over Matter. 2 blue. So very hard to cast in this deck. But choose discard a card, tap or untap artifact, creatures, or lands.
It's very, very powerful. And yeah, you can discard a bunch of cards that you don't want. You can untap all of your lands, attack with your commander, draw a bunch of new cards, and now all your mana's untapped. It's very powerful.
Yeah, you probably can't play this card because it's got 4 blue pips in it. So let's just talk about the creatures you can cheat into play.
That's the fun part anyway.
Yeah, Mr. Foxglove is bringing out some scary creatures.
Have you met it that betrays?
Oh, gosh.
I found him out wandering on the road.
Oh, woo, look at my new friend in Bloomburrow. What does an Eldrazi look like when it comes to Bloomburrow?
Snakes.
Yeah.
Just ball of snakes.
Menacing looking creatures, yeah. So there's a lot of obviously huge creatures in Bant. You just can look up mana value like 6 plus creatures in these colors on Scryfall and just find any that really fancy, tickle your fancy.
Sphinx of the Second Sun, Blightsteel Colossus. What kind of player are you?
Coma, Cosmos Serpent.
Astral Dragon's one of my favorites.
Ooh, that's cool. Kodama of the Eastry is funny too.
That's a fun one because you can put more stuff into play, and it gets a bunch of cards out of your hand. That's good.
Same with Galta Stampede Tyrant. That's an ETB, which is wild.
Look, maybe Mr. Foxglove has spent some time in Phyrexia. Maybe he introduces you to Vorinclex or Jin Gataxias.
Yeah, or Hullbreaker Horror.
He's like, oh, he's nice when you get to know him.
Yeah, exactly. Or Terastodon.
Cool.
Nasty.
Talk about a generous gift.
Yeah, such a generous gift. This is definitely a Deadeye Navigator deck if you can just play it. Yeah, because you're going to have these other, like Deadeye Navigator plus Terastodon. Again, this is the mean version of Mr. Foxglove. And there's no guarantee that you're going to get Mr. Foxglove to even trigger at this point. Because if people know that's what's coming, they're waiting. There's like 3 players at the table, all with 1.5 to 2 removal spells ready for him.
Yeah, you're going to need some protection. You're going to need to be able to slip him out the back. Or,
slip him out the back, heroic intervention.
Lightning Greaves, that kind of thing. Keep him safe. Give him a new pair of shoes. He's dandy.
One thing I really liked in this deck is that if you double the trigger of Mr. Foxglove, you actually get to do both halves of it.
I love that.
So Roaming Throne, the Lithoform Engine, Strionic Resonator means when he attacks, you draw up, and then the doubled trigger means you then get to drop a creature on the battlefield.
Clones, again, you can do the non-legendary clones, your Sakashimas. You could even give him a Helm of the Host, make tons of Mr. Foxgloves. The girls will go wild.
So cool.
So you get 2 Mr. Foxglove triggers. Pretty sweet. Expensive, but
that's,
he deserves it. I love this include because I haven't seen this card in ages.
Finest Hour. Yeah, I saw Mr. Foxglove. I thought about Rafik of the Many, and I was like, wait, Finest Hour is a great card in this deck. So this is 5 mana for an enchantment, 2 green, white, blue, has Exalted. Whenever a creature you control attacks alone, it gets +1/+1 till end of turn. Whenever a creature you control attacks alone, if it's the first combat phase, you untap it, and then you get an additional combat phase.
In Bant? I didn't know they made those.
They do now.
It's pretty sweet.
Yeah.
You buff Mr. Foxglove twice and you get 2 triggers off of it.
Yep.
Nobody will see it coming.
No. Everyone saw it coming. And then 2 cards we just talked about, Brotherhood Regalia, Whisper Silk Cloak. Just ways to get Mr. Foxglove attacking and not blocked and hopefully doing the thing. This is as glass cannon-y of a deck as it gets.
I agree. Mr. Foxglove is difficult. You need ways to give him haste. You need ways to protect him.
Yeah.
Because he is sort of scary, but he is definitely slow.
And sometimes you just will draw cards off of him, and then everyone goes, okay, well, that can't happen again.
Yeah. It's like, I draw 8 cards.
Yeah.
If your opponents are greedy and draw 8 cards anyway.
Yeah. So I don't know.
Sometimes you could draw like 2 cards.
This card might be better in just a regular Bant shell and just pops up to come in and do a lot of card drawing or creature dropping or whatever.
I think he's fun.
But by himself, if you do decide to build it, just know what kind of game you're getting yourself into. Your opponents should know what's up to.
It reminds me a little bit of Seerden from Lord of the Rings.
Oh, Seerden. Yeah, actually, Seerden, you can look at Seerden decks and find a lot of comparisons and good cards to put in.
Up next is the infamous Cruelclaw, revealed appropriately by Voxy.
Now, this card is just a better Mr. Foxglove as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, it starts with 1 black-red. It's 3 mana for a 3/3 with menace. Whenever the infamous Cruelclaw deals combat damage to a player, exile cards from the top of your library until you exile a non-land card. You may cast that card by discarding a card rather than paying its mana cost. Free spells.
Free spell. You get the cast of it as well. So again, do you like Eldrazi?
So does the Cruelclaw.
Yeah, you can put the new Ulamog in here. You can put the new Emrakul in here. And also the discard means that you might be able to madness the Emrakul out occasionally if you're playing it, right?
I actually love this commander as a reanimation commander.
Yeah.
Because it means you can flood it with big things. So, because you really want a high density of like giant threats,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And the other cards can be reanimation spells because your commander also discards cards.
Yes,
So
in
if you
addition.
have an Ulamog in your hand, you can discard it to pay the cost of the reanimation spell you just did.
Mm-hmm.
And now you have like it's you may cast that card by discarding rather than paying its mana cost. So I don't think you can reanimate a thing
That
with
you're discarding. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think that timing works out, but it just means that your deck works really, really well together and the discard is going towards something.
And the nuts thing about it is that, yeah, you get to cast a non-land card. It's not creatures only.
Yeah,
So,
I mean, you could hit anything.
Yeah. Breach the Multiverse is really good, especially with the Reanimator strategy because you're milling on top of all of that. So, yeah, this card is busted. So you're going to run your Reanimate, Animate Dead, Living Death, this type of deck.
You're in control of what's in your graveyard, so you might as well start putting stuff in there.
Yeah.
You could also do like an instant and sorcery reanimator, which is a little bit trickier without blue, but you could run Mizzix Mastery and invoke Calamity and those kind of things to flash back these big spells. And then you're going to hit them with your commander naturally from exile.
Yeah.
Hit the Mother Load is a good one.
4 red, discover 10. So that's going to hit a lot of your Eldrazi and the big stuff. If the discover card's mana value is less than 10, create a number of tap treasure tokens equal to the difference.
I also like Blood for the Blood God.
Oh, yeah.
Discard your hand, then draw 8 cards. Blood for the Blood God deals 8 damage to each opponent. Exile it. So you draw a fresh hand to discard to your commander, and you deal 8 to each opponent. It's wild.
That's wild. Rise of the Eldrazi. It's a 12 mana spell. This spell can't be countered. Destroy target permanent. Target player draws 4 cards. Take an extra turn after this one. So really good with your commander because you may be able to hit them once already, and if you take an extra turn, you will be able to do it again.
Yeah, flash it back with the stuff we mentioned before. Arcane Bombardment is even an expensive enchantment that'll help you cast them multiple.
Yeah, just to go over and over and over again.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's wild. I love it. You also have some discard value. So like Shadowgrange Archfiend is a madness card. You can pay 2 in the black and pay 8 life. When it enters the battlefield, each opponent sacks a creature with the greatest power, and then you gain life equal to the greatest power among creatures sacked this way. Big Game Hunter is awesome. I even think Archfiend of Ifnir, even just getting a one-time trigger when you discard a card or cycle it, you put a -1/-1 on a creature on each
That's so
creature your
powerful.
opponents control. Yeah, even just one time, it's a permanent -1/-1 counter.
Oh, yeah.
So this could just sit out there and generate a lot of value just over time.
Anger is obviously a great card in this deck. You've got a discard outlet in your command zone, and you're casting huge threats. Extra combats are probably going to be a thing in this deck, and if you've cast an Ulamog on your first hit, well, Lamont can attack on your second hit.
Yeah, and we'll talk about extra combat in a second here because we got to beat the odds. If you're doing top deck manipulation, you don't have as many options as you do in blue, but you still got a Brainstone. You still have Scroll Rack, and then you have ways to also like scry. So Hidetsugu Devouring Chaos allows you to sack a creature to scry 2, but you can also pay 2 in red, tap it, exile the top card of your library. You may play that card this turn. When you exile a non-land card this way, Hidetsugu deals damage equal to the mana value to any target. So if you just got
like
random 10 drops, you can just nug people.
Sweet.
And then Sensei's Divining Top is also
course, yeah.
just the classic way to manipulate the top of your deck.
Not to mention, your commander is only a 3/3 with menace, so you do need some ways to make sure that the infamous Cruelclaw can deal combat damage in the late game. We've mentioned the unblockable stuff a lot today, but I like Vorok Battlehorns as
this
well
card
in
is
this deck.
sick.
It says, equipped creature has trample and can't be blocked by more than one creature. Well, your commander has menace.
So this makes it unblockable pretty much.
And gives it trample, which doesn't matter.
Yeah, I mean, this could be great on your Eldrazi or other things too, right?
yeah.
So it is very powerful there. And then there's ways to do it twice because it's about combat damage. So Fire Shrieker, Lizard Blades are ways to deal double strike damage. So you get 2 of the triggers. And then Overpowering Attack is another Assassin's Creed card that's going to see a lot of play because you can cast it for its free running cost for 2 in a red if you dealt combat damage with an assassin or commander. And it's basically, Dee played this on our Assassin's Creed episode, but you untap all creatures that attack this turn. If it's your main phase, you get another combat phase after that and then another main phase.
Yeah.
So go nuts.
If you're not winning with combat damage, you can also get a lot of value from Cast from Exile synergies. Passionate Archaeologist can start nugging people for the hopefully big spells that you're casting with your commander. Now, Feshni says if you cast a big spell, you get 2 of those from Exile. Keeper of Secrets is sort of not Impact Tremors, it's Warstorm Surge,
yeah.
for casting from Exile, and that's on a big creature itself. So that's perfect to head off of your commander.
Yeah, and then you're just at this point, it doesn't even matter what the creature is, you're just killing people with damage.
Right. Damage
Wild Magic Sorcerer allows you to give that first spell you cast from Exile Cascade.
And easily one of the best Cast from Exile cards in existence is Delayed Blast Fireball.
Yeah.
It's 1 red, it deals 2 damage to each opponent and each creature you control, but if you cast it from Exile, if you hit it off your commander, you deal 5 damage to each of their creatures and their faces.
Pretty much a board wipe. Yeah. You can foretell it too in your hand and all that, but it's way better to cast from Exile. So yeah, I like Infamous Cruelclaw a lot. This has gotten a lot of talk online as well.
Yes.
Because people are saying that it's going to be really good also in Standard and all those formats.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Up next, I love this guy. It's Wick, the Whorled Mine.
Whoa, it's me, Wick. I'm a rat warlock.
3 and a black. Whenever Wick or another rat you control enters, create a 1/1 black snail creature token if you don't control a snail. Otherwise, put a +1/+1 counter on a snail you control.
Okay.
And then blue-black-red, so he's a Grixis commander, sacrifice a snail. Wick deals damage equal to the sacrificed creature's power to each opponent.
Whoa.
And then draw cards equal to the sacrificed creature's power.
Okay.
He's sort of a weird little Minskin-boo.
Yeah, that's a good point. There is some Minsk and Boo energy here in Grixis, notably. I love the fact that you're drawing cards equal to the power. This is a multi-opponent fling as well. Sick. Count me in.
Cast rats to make your snail bigger, throw your snail, and hurt your friends.
Yeah.
What more could you ask for? We're not going to spend a ton of time talking about the rats side of things. There's a lot of rat lists online. You put all the rat legends in there, but often those are mono black lists, so they don't get the opportunity to play blue and red and all the other stuff. So let's talk about the red cards that you can put in this deck.
Yeah, Redcap Gutter Dweller is great because it creates 2 1/1 rats when it comes in, and then you can basically start sacking your rats to exile the top card of your library, so there's a little bit of card advantage there. Song of Totentanz is probably the best card in the deck.
Oh, yeah.
X and a red, create X 1/1 black rat creature tokens, and then creatures you control gain haste until end of turn. So again, this is whenever a Wick or another rat enters, so you're going to get all the rat triggers every single time a new rat comes in, so any of those X spells are extra good.
It's also worth mentioning Plague of Vermin. This is a black spell, but it's incredibly good with Wick. 6 and a black. Starting with you, each player may pay any amount of life. Repeat this process until no one pays life. Each player puts a 1/1 black rat creature token into play for each 1 life he or she paid this way.
Yeah.
You pay 7 mana, and then you go life,
30 life or whatever.
You make that many
30
rats, buff your snail, sack your
it.
snail, and kill your opponents, whether they paid life for the snail or not, or paid
G.
life for the rats or not. Pretty sweet.
Yeah, no one should be playing life for rats when you have this commander out.
Not at all.
And then you got Changeling, so Bloodline Pretender, Taurian Mauler is really cool because it counts as a rat and a snail, and Taurian Maulers, they'll become huge. They'll become like a 12/12 in one
That's
turn
a big
cycle.
snail.
Yeah, it's a big snail. You can draw 12 cards, deal 12 to every player. Pretty good. And now that you have blue, Reflections of Lit Yara is in play. 400 blue enchantment. When it enters the battlefield, you choose a creature type, rat. Whenever you cast a spell of the chosen type, copy that spell.
Yeah. This is a great black market connections deck as well. It makes both a rat and a snail changeling.
Yeah, it's a
little
3/2.
free thing to throw is awesome. So I love that. Obviously, the treasure and the card draw are the most important part there, but you can make use of that changeling as well.
I think you're making the changeling for sure. With
Definitely, you've got to.
Because you just get a free snail, and having multiple snails to throw around too is great. Maskwood Nexus is the thing that makes everything the creature type that you want. So
Everything's a rat.
Everything's a snail. You can toss everything.
Wick's a snail. Throw him.
Throw it. And then I like the idea of also creating some parts of the deck that allow you to buff up your snail so that when you throw it, it gets that extra power boost or whatever. So the Iron Crag is a really interesting mana rock. Whenever a legendary creature enters the battlefield, you can have it turned into an equipment that gives equipped creature +3/+3. So then it becomes a bigger snail. Heirloom Blade is very good in any typal decks. So then you give it a +3/+1. When the creature dies and you sack it, you can find another creature type with it. So changelings can be found by the snails.
Loop your changelings.
Yeah,
That's really
or if you
powerful.
sack a rat, then you just get to find another rat.
One I added
Or
was
if your rat dies,
Defiler of Flesh. It's as an additional cost to cast black permanent spells. You may pay 2 life. The spells cost black less to cast if you paid the life this way. So it makes it easier for you to cast rats. And then whenever you cast a black permanent spell, all your rats, target creature you control gets +1/+1 and gains menace until end of turn.
Ooh.
So now your rats are buffing your snail ×2, and you're ramping out all of your rats that you have hypothetically drawn in this deck. It does feel like a very strong engine piece.
Yeah. Agitator Ant, I'm always looking for reasons to play this in the deck. At the beginning of your end step, each player may put 2/1 counters on a creature they control, and they're all goaded that had counters
Buff
put on
your
them.
snail.
Buff your snail.
I picture it. Do the rats worship the snail? That's how I picture it.
They're all like, oh.
They're like,
Oh, make it bigger, feed it.
Feed the snail.
Feed the snail. Grafted Exoskeleton's pretty funny here.
You can give your commander infect, and I think it just kills them as long as you have a snail that's 10 or power or greater.
Yeah, and so a really also a fun way to play this deck is just you can kill them with damage just outside of it. So if you have your like Impact Tremors and you're playing your X Song of Totentans, Disrupt Decorum is really fun, I think, because you just want your opponents to get down to a low life total. And the more ways that you get them to attack each other, so now they have open attacks for your little rats or your big snail to come through. And then Spectacular Showdown. You can overload it to put a double strike counter on each creature, and they're all goaded that way. Bloodthirsty Blade, right? There's just ways to just get damage going around the table, because I think that's the way that this deck wins is, you're going to be drawing a lot of cards. The moment you sack one snail, everyone's going to go, uh-oh. So the faster you can get to a point where they can't stop it from happening, the better.
Right.
So then you're playing your Carter Doom Scourges and all the goad stuff, I think, if you want to go sort of that direction. And your play group is combat based.
Right.
Right.
I would definitely run, is it Helm of Sauron in this deck? Sauron's hat. It'll be on the screen. It's 4 mana.
Put it on the snail.
It's 4 mana for a mana rock, but it taps for 2 mana, and it's any amount of Grixis. So you can do like blue and a red or red and a black, and it just means that you can sort of have this snail activation up all the time, which I do think is important. You want to make sure that you can threaten to activate it, that if somebody goes to remove your snail or remove Wick, you still get the value out of it.
Yeah, it's similar to like Rin and Seri decks, right? You want to have the mana to do so, and holding Grixis up is actually kind of difficult if you have a lot of spells that got red or black or blue in them.
Yeah, cool. That's Wick. Wick's cool.
Wick is cool.
I like the flavor on that a lot.
Yeah, really someone make a John Wick rat altar of this one. You know, and then the snail is just a gun.
This is my snail. Yeah.
John,
like, that's a gun.
That's a gun, John. Sorry.
Yeah, but if I throw it.
He is very inventive at finding ways to defeat his enemies, yeah.
This commander is featured in the Bloomburrow Game Nights?
Yeah, it's coming up. It's a pretty powerful one. I think Josh has already spoiled who's on it as well.
I believe so.
It's Dr. Lupo. He's going to be playing Wild Seer, Scouring Maw. 3 red and a green for a legendary creature elemental wolf with trample. It's a 6/6. Enchantment spells you cast from your hand have Cascade.
Hey!
Party time.
It's Gruul Enchantress, which is very interesting.
Yeah.
You still run all of your enchantresses, especially the enchantment ones.
Yes.
Eidolon of Blossoms, Enchantress's Presence are going to be the 2 best ones, but there's a lot of great enchantresses in this archetype. I mean, just Argothian Enchantress, you're going to be able to hit off of a Cascade half the time.
Yeah, pretty good.
And if you're casting one enchantment from Cascade and you hit another one, you draw 2 cards per Enchantress.
Yeah, even like enchantment creatures.
Yeah.
Dryad of the Elysian Grove, Springheart Nantuko, like we spoke about again. And if you're playing red-green, a Springheart Nantuko is going to hit a 1-drop, right? So you can have, pretty reliably, you're going to hit your Soul Rings or whatever it is that you've got in there.
Whatever you... I mean, when you're playing a Cascade deck, controlling the bottom of the curve is so powerful.
Yeah.
Your 2-drops are going to be really good, so that means you'll hit your Soul Ring, or you hit a Lightning Bolt, or you hit a Tutor, or whatever your 1 or 0-drop slot is going to be really, really powerful.
Yeah, and then...
Or should be really, really powerful.
And then because you're casting giant things, right, the Cascade doesn't need to cascade into an enchantment, notably. It could be a creature or whatever. So you can have your Rhythm of the Wild to give them all haste, Nylea's Colossus to make them huge. Bigger on the inside is a really fun one.
More Cascade.
Yes.
More Cascade.
A 5-mana enchantment aura, enchant artifact or land. Enchant permanent has tap, target player adds 2 mana of any one color. The next spell they cast this turn has Cascade! Yeah, because you need more.
I do think this is interesting because if you're playing Gruul Enchantress, a lot of your best enchantments have to do with creatures.
Yeah.
It still needs to be kind of a stompy, gruely deck because most of your best resources are just about having creatures on the battlefield. So you want to make sure that you have the big creatures that these cards care about. And Nylea's Colossus is a perfect example of just like, let's make our stuff big so that your, Rhythm of the Wilds or your Yavimaya...
or your commander, because it has trample.
Or your commander are just...
lethal.
Actual threats in combat. This is not a dirtily Enchantress deck.
Yeah. A great win con too is Call Forth the Tempest. 5 red with just Cascade as a sorcery, and it deals damage to each creature your opponents control equal to the total mana value of other spells you've cast this turn. So you could have huge turns here where Call Forth the Tempest is on top of another thing, or if you have like a giant 9-mana Cascade enchantment. I don't think there are any. But
there's X-Spell enchantments.
Yeah, exactly. So there's ways to just, again, like, because you're doing the big mana thing, you got to find ways to make sure that your opponent's boards are cleared. Otherwise, you're just, sometimes casting huge enchantments, and it's like, okay, great, you cast a city on fire, but you...
You have like 3 creatures on fire?
3 creatures. Oh, just block that one. Okay, your Trampler's a bit of a problem. Yeah. But there are ways, again, just to like find... You're going to win through damage, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
And you want to clear the board and get as much out of the way as possible.
Sort of like Alania, you have a 5-mana commander that doesn't do anything until you cast another spell. So I do think 2-mana enchantments are actually going to be really, really important in this deck.
Yeah.
So making sure that you have a host of them that are at that mana cost is going to be great. Bitter Reunion, Kenris Transformation, Sylvan Library, all of these are great Enchantress cards already. But make sure you have a plethora of them at 2 so you can double spell when you cast your commander and get that value even if your commander gets removed. Because enchantments have Cascade is a scary line of text.
Yeah, I would say this is definitely one of those remove on-site commanders again as well. That's why I really like Bitter Reunion, because it gives haste as well. And I like this too. If you have a 1-drop, you can hit a Soul Talisman or a Wheel of Fate because they are suspend cards, and so they actually have a mana value below what you're
0.
cascading. Yeah, it's 0. So you can actually cascade them without the whole suspend thing happening.
Utopia Sprawls have Cascade too.
Yeah. So Wild Seer, it seems really straightforward, but this is just like big mana, big spells, crack them. Yeah.
And you can do cast from exile stuff in this deck as well. We're not going to go through all of them again. Many of the ones that we mentioned previously apply from Iron Claw.
Nalashi and all.
Nalfeshni. Also apply here because you're casting more spells from exile.
Yeah.
All right, we've got 1.5 more commanders to talk about here, starting with a big kitty. It's Igra, Eater of All.
Meow.
Ugh, this card is so so sick. It's 3
It's
black,
busted.
green.
Everything's busted.
It's busted. 3 black, green for a legendary elemental cat. It's a 6/6 with ward, sack of food. That seems impossible. Unless it says other creatures are food artifacts in addition to their other types and have the food text.
What?
Whenever a food is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, put 2+1/+1 counters on Igra, Eater of all. Oh my gosh. What a sick line of text is just other creatures are food.
I eat everything.
Jingataxius, food.
Food. Yeah, turn them into
Still Colossus,
food. Already an artifact, now a food.
That warrior, food.
Yeah,
Nothing
nothing.
matters to
Yeah.
Igra, which is awesome.
Yeah, this feels like a card that was on Kaldheim, you know what I mean?
It does. It
Right?
feels like
a god of sorts.
I mean, they basically are on this plane, right?
Yeah.
These are the big, most terrifying beasts.
Yeah.
Realm. So there's some cool ways to build it. Basically, turning all of your opponent's stuff into food is one thing, but turning all your stuff into food is sort of interesting and weird,
yeah.
too. It does some funky stuff with Cauldron Familiar.
Oh gosh, kitty cat.
Because Cauldron Familiar is a food, and it has a line of text that says, sacrifice a food, return Cauldron of Familiar from your graveyard to the battlefield. You can't activate this unless Cauldron Familiar is in your graveyard, of course. But it does mean that if it's in your graveyard, you can sack any creature to bring back Cauldron Familiar, sack Cauldron Familiar to any payoff, and it goes back to the graveyard. You can sack your whole board, draining everything. It's like a weird blood artist.
Or you can just pay 2 mana to sack it as a food, too, which is kind of funny, right?
You can crack it. Yeah, you could pay. You don't even need a sack outlet. Yeah, you could pay 2. It'll have summoning sickness.
Yeah, because they are food creatures. So
Right.
it's not just pure artifact.
So it just becomes this sort of weird sack outlet / payoff that buffs your Eater at instant speed if you have a sack outlet, or if you have, a way to give Cauldron Familiar haste.
Party.
There's a ton of food, like good food synergy. Trail of Crumbs is very, very powerful. Nuka-Cola vending machine. Get it in there.
Yeah. Whenever you sack a food, create a tap treasure token.
Nice. We'll take that.
Sick. If you have like Kruk Clan Ironworks, or just even because your creatures are foods, just any sack outlet, Viscera Seer, then you're going to get these triggers over and over again from Trail of Crumbs in this. One
of the category of card that's already starting to spike is cards that destroy all artifacts.
Green loves that.
Creeping Corrosion just says destroy all artifacts. And with that, if you have Igra on the board when that happens, that destroys all creatures except Igra.
Except for Igra.
Puts that many counters times 2 onto Igra and leaves the board clear for a uncontested commander damage win.
Yeah, see you later. Bane of Progress is also really funny in this deck.
Yeah.
Because now you're blowing up everything again.
Including Bane of Progress.
It's the bane of its own progress, clearly.
And that does a similar thing. There's a couple of cards that do this.
Yeah.
Creeping Corrosion is sort of the least complicated one, but you get the idea.
Yeah. You definitely play Manglehorn in this deck because it says artifacts your opponent's control enter the battlefield tapped. So this is now
creatures enter
tapped. Yeah.
And it's ETB, destroy a creature or an artifact.
Yeah, it's like the best Ravenous or Chupacabra or whatever.
Destroy itself.
That's true. You don't want to do that.
No, probably not.
Let's talk about this next card for value.
Oh, yeah.
People have been like, this is the anti-treasure card. No, this is the pro-Igra card.
It's Viridian Revel. Whenever an artifact is put into an opponent's graveyard from the battlefield, you may draw a card. I will, thank you.
Yeah. May? No, I'm going to draw that card.
Disciple of the Vault, there's a lot of artifact hate here. It's like whenever an artifact goes to the graveyard, you draw, you drain, you gain 5 life.
Fangren Marauder, that was a Pauper staple for a while.
It's there's a lot of busted stuff that you can do when you know the board is full of artifacts.
So let's talk about combos, because we wouldn't be complete without saying how you can win the game off of this.
Yeah, there's a lot of things, like both Camellia the Seed Miser and Experimental Confectioner.
Yeah.
Both say whenever you sacrifice a food, you make some kind of token. And in this deck, your tokens are food. So you can sacrifice the token, make a token, sacrifice the token, make a token, sacrifice the token, make a token. All we need is a free sack outlet and any payoff.
Yeah,
Blood Artist or etc.
Or just make a ton of mana with an Astronaut's Altar.
That too. It's infinite dies, infinite ETBs.
Draw as many cards you want. Viridian Revel, right? There's a lot of different ways.
Not Viridian Revel. That's only your opponent's stuff.
Oh, it's an opponent? Okay.
Yeah.
In that case, Disciple of the Vault, Blood Artist, all that sort of
just
stuff.
any kind of payoff for a creature or artifact entering or leaving the battlefield, or a sack outlet that just has a payoff on it.
Yeah.
So that works with those 2 creatures. Animation module predictably shows up here as well.
Yep, because of the 1/1 counters this time, you can pay 1 to make a 1/1 when the counter is placed on a permanent. So you sack a food, your commander gets something, but you use Ashnod's Altar.
Counters.
You're going to have the man to create a 1/1, and then you can keep sacking the Ashnod's Altar and keep paying that 1 to make your commander infinitely big. Or have the payoff again to just create infinite sack loops and just get drain off of that.
And Cauldron Familiar and Nether Trader go infinite with either a Phyrexian Altar or a Warden Soul Trader now. Because the Nether Trader says whenever another creature is put into your graveyard from the battlefield, you may pay black. If you do, return Nether Trader from your graveyard to the battlefield.
Well, there you go.
So that's your food to sack with the Cauldron Familiar, and you can do loop-de-doops.
Yep, and Warren Soul Trader, you can pay a life to sack a creature, create a treasure token, so the Cauldron Familiar is going to get you the life when it comes back, so you don't need to worry about that.
Yeah, a lot of loops that happen with Igra. Food is a very well-supported archetype, and not to mention this card's just incredible with like Playcrafter effects.
Oh, gosh.
It just comes in, sacks itself, 4 foods go to the graveyard, your commander gets 8 counters. So you could build it that way if you want to build a more of a lockdown style of deck.
Yeah, Igra seems, again, like one of those commanders that when you play against it, you're probably not in for a good time.
It's very powerful. It's
Yeah.
not just a food deck.
And oppressive specifically, because again, it's turning your creatures into things that are easily interactable with.
Yeah, it is interestingly a creature deck. It has a lot of like food interactions, but I think Camellia the Seed Miser is more of a like artifact food deck, which is what we're used to seeing. So there are 2 green-black popular food commanders in this set. We're not going to spend a ton of time talking about Camellia, but it is a different kind of build. Obviously, it goes infinite in Igra, so you probably put Igra in Camellia and Camellia in Igra if that's the way that you build your decks. But this is a like Kirkland Ironworks, sacrifice all your foods, make a ton of squirrels, sack more foods, buff up all your squirrels, win through combat damage.
Yeah.
It's much closer to a Chatterfang than Igra is.
That's right. Chatterfang does exist as the green-black. So let's talk about Camellia really fast. It is 1 black-green for a 3/3 with Menace. Other squirrels you control have Menace. And then whenever you sacrifice 1 or more foods, you make a 1/1 green squirrel creature token. And you can pay 2 mana and forage and to put a 1/1 counter on each other squirrel you control to forage, exile 3 cards from your graveyard, or sack a food.
Yeah.
So
Waste of sack foods is a big deal, but Camellia herself is also a food sack outlet.
yeah.
Peregrine Took is incredible in this deck. It both makes foods and sacks them.
Every time you make,
When you make a squirrel, you make a food, and then
pretty good.
and so it goes. Witch's Oven sacks creatures, makes foods.
Yeah.
Kirkland Ironworks sacks foods, makes mana. Guillaume Master Chef sacks foods, taps creatures, or protects your creatures, or
makes something indestructible.
he does, and he also makes foods on your end step, especially if you're doing like loop-de-doop stuff with Cauldron Familiars.
I like Braid's Risen Nightmare. You're just always going to have foods to sack, but you could also do creatures and stuff, and making all the opponents do that as well is pretty oppressive if they, and otherwise you just draw cards, which is awesome.
And then you probably win with your squirrel tokens. There's a couple of ways to buff them very easily. Of course, Beastmaster Ascension, the forageability on your commander, or like Knight of the Sweet's Revenge.
Oh, yeah. I love this card. It's a one from, Wilds of Eldraine. Wilds of Eldraine, yeah. Foods you control, you can tap now to add for green mana. Pretty good.
And you can pay 7 and sack it and give everything +X, where X is the number of food you control. Remember, your squirrels are all over the place and have menace.
Yeah, that's pretty good. Igor likes that as well, obviously.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a lot of new cool squirrel tech from Bloomburrow, but it's pretty easy to find because they're squirrels and they care about squirrels.
yeah. Chatterfang's like, I thought that was the only cool squirrel commander. Now that's all changed.
Yeah, I don't know if Camellia is going to be as popular as Chatterfang. It feels like it's just going to go in the 99.
Yeah.
But
you also have the Acorn Gang as well now.
Yeah, that one's more squirrel specific and less about like food and treasures and that kind of thing. Because both Camellia and Chatterfang are more of an artifact token deck than they are a squirrel deck.
Okay. Wow. That was a lot of talking. Woo! As you might be able to tell, we are squirreled out at the end of that one. Let's talk about our favorite commander. Rachel and I are in high agreement about this one, obviously. You should be able to predict what our favorite commander is.
We agree with a lot of people on this.
It's Flubs.
It's
the
Flubs.
Fool.
You gotta love a fool.
You gotta love a fool.
The flavor's sweet. The art is amazing. The flavor text is right. The ability is cool. It's a downside to play around. It's hard to hate Flubs.
And there's going to be a lot of people building it in so many different ways from now until the end of time, it feels like. There's always going to be a new, like, hey, check out this ridiculous Flubs build I figured out.
He's extremely powerful and is certainly a candidate for the most powerful commander on the board.
Yeah.
So I think we could consider Flubs in this list, but Jimmy, what commander do you think is the most powerful coming out of Bloomburrow?
I think Helga, Skittish Seer is probably at the top for me.
I think that's fair.
Just again, the ability to add X mana where X is equal to its power. There's so many ways to just go nuts and infinite with Helga as well. So for me, it's Helga, but maybe a couple of points taken away because it is a 3 color commander, so it's a little bit harder to cast on curve. I don't know. It's still very good though.
Other commanders that we've seen like this are extremely powerful, right?
Yeah,
it's like
Animar.
it's your Selvalas, it's your Animars. I'm thinking of the elf that puts counter as evolve, or whenever an elf comes in, you put a counter on it, it taps for a bajillion mana. That reminds me a little bit of Helga as well.
Yeah, just having a tap ability on the commander that scales, I think is just generally very powerful. And then when you have infinite combos on top, hooray!
And she's a cutie patootie.
She is cute.
And you can't stop the power of cute.
How about you, Rachel? This is not cute. This is terrifying.
Yeah, the bunnies are running in fear. I think Egro is the one I'm gonna pick for this. I think Flubs is probably pretty close.
Yeah.
I would probably consider Flubs, but we've already talked about him. Egro is the kind of thing that there's a ton of combos with it. There's a ton of really powerful synergies, and it's highly, highly interactive. So I think it's just gonna be the kind of card that if you see it in the command zone, you're like, all right.
Yeah. This is the card from the trailer too, right?
The one in the trailer was the wolf, I think. It was Wild Seer, wasn't it?
Oh, was it? Okay. Because it kind of looks like the setting looks
it
like
definitely does. Yeah. It definitely does. I'm not 100% sure, but I think it was a wolf.
It's terrifying either way.
Yeah. Super, super scary. Really powerful commanders in Bloomburrow. You don't mistake their cute faces. They're doing some busted stuff.
Yeah.
Flubs, Helga, Igra even has a cutie pie little panther face.
Our little
with green
red-black
glowing
weasel.
maw.
There's so many
The
things.
red-black weasel is very powerful as well. To the listeners, which commanders do you think are the most powerful commanders in the set? Did we miss any? Are you planning on building any of the commanders we talked about today? How are you building Mr. Flubs? What are the sweet cards that we missed to add to those?
Mr. Flubs.
Sections. And again, if you want to talk about any of the cards that are face commanders of the precons, those are going to be in their episodes. So stay tuned for that. Those are some really, really sweet ones there as well.
Okay.
If you want to pick up any of the cards or singles sealed product from Bloomburrow, go to cardkingdom.com/command. They have a huge selection of Magic product and singles and other TCGs, and because they have a huge selection, that means that you can buy a ton in the same place and they show up in one package.
Nice.
I love that they have the professionalism and the knowledge to get me the cards that I ordered at home safely and accurately. It's always frustrating when you order a card and the wrong version shows up, the wrong foil shows up, and you have to go back and forth with a team.
Returning,
knowing that I'm speaking with a professional team and I can get the cards that I am looking for. Plus, they get them to you, safely and timely.
Yeah, we love that.
And you can support the show. Go to cardkingdom.com/command.
And then get those cards, sleeve them up, put them into some cool-looking Bloomburrow sleeves or on your cool Bloomburrow playmat or in your cool Bloomburrow deck box. At ultrapro.com/command, you can imagine the things I'm going to say about Bloomburrow. It's all cute. The ULTRAPRO's got the license. You can probably do this sponsor call-out yourself next time.
Check out the Mana 8 product.
Yeah.
Cool as well.
The most important thing, though, is that you type in ultrapro.com/command, and then they just recently finished up like a 50% flash sale on a bunch of Magic products.
Yeah, I picked up a couple things.
So they're always having great sales.
They did a secret lair drop as well.
It's the only newsletter that I actually want to subscribe to, which is kind of wild to think about. So ultrapro.com/command, you can support the show, get the stuff that you need to protect your stuff, make it look cool, and then they got their new Apex sleeves coming out with every single set too. So just tons of stuff to check out if you're looking to upgrade the way you protect your collection or just want to begin collecting in a way that's actually organized. ultrapro.com/command's got your back.
Big thank you to our amazing team here at the Command Zone. Thank you to Damon Lentz, Eric Lem, Gaurav Galati, Jordan Pridgeon, Jamie Block, Manson Lung, Josh Murphy, Jake Boss, Sam Waldo, Evan Limburger, Katie Cole, Mitch Trafford, and of course, yours truly, Josh Lee Kwai.
All right, that wraps it up for this mega episode of Tiny Creatures and some big as well. Thanks so much, everyone. Wow.
That was for you.
It landed. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for your attention. For further inquiries, send an email to commandcast@rocketjump.com or ask us on Twitter @JFWong and @JoshLeeQuai. See you later, alligator.
Greetings, humans.